The word itself is what I think we're okay. So far, I don't go for the first thing that she said, they got close enough to town. She was like, I need my little
because we're up here now. So what if we do that?
So right now, like I'm not seeing it.
Okay, so this is what I need to do then.
No, I would share,
Right?
nope.
From here?
Can you, oh yeah, you can do that.
Because now it's recording on the Zoom.
And now I can see it on as a participant.
Since we're recording the meeting, that would be the way to do it. Okay. Fantastic. Okay. Are you ready for this? All right. Good afternoon. Ooh, I'm trying not to trip. 12:30. We will go ahead and get started. We're happy to have you here for in-person directors meeting. It's so good to see your faces. and the rest of you, I guess, because we've been seeing some faces, but good to see the rest of you too. So welcome to Directors Meeting. For our opening business today, as always, we will start with Director Lambert, who has her Executive Director report to you. We also have Joylyn here from UAPCS, who will share just some updates coming from the association. And then I will walk you through our favorite segment, the In Case You Missed It. So Jennifer, take it away.
So welcome everyone. Is there anywhere I need to stand to be available?
So fun hearing it when you were right here, like, no, right here by where Marie was.
Okay.
That was a good place.
I should know this, but this is the first time we have been in person since COVID has started. So yay. And welcome. So anyone who maybe doesn't remember, I'm just going to go over a little bit of housekeeping. If there is an emergency, you go out the door, you just go to your right. There's actually some glass doors with an emergency exit that is directly outside. Just go up the stairs. You don't enter or exit those doors, so you may not know, but just in case, knock on wood that there isn't, but just in case there is an emergency, that's where you go. If you need to use the restroom, that is on the opposite end. You go left and they're just right by the elevators. If you parked within the arms, the parking is free if you get it validated. So just make sure you do that on the way out if you haven't already done that. I do have So state charter school board meeting is this week. It is on Wednesday instead of Thursday. We normally meet the second Thursday of every month, but that is Veterans Day. So also FYI, if you're trying to get a hold of anyone in this office on Thursday or anyone in state government on Thursday, you're probably not going to get them because it is a state holiday. In fact, I believe it's a federal holiday, so no either. But that's why we're holding our meeting on Wednesday. At that meeting, we're going to give a retention report. And then based on looking at the data in retention, we found a school, Thomas Edison South, that has consistently had really high retention rates. And so William Evans is going to present and they're going to talk and just share some of the things that they have done. You may want to check in. Our meetings are always streamed live, but they are also recorded and up on YouTube for posterity's sake. So you can always go back and watch at like 2 times speed. That's how I like to watch my YouTube anyway. But yes, so they're going to be there. We also, after lunch, are going to talk about enrollment. And some of you may have seen the news reports that the first time ever charter schools had lower enrollment this year than last year. So let me just give you a little bit of analysis of how we have looked at that. If you just take last year out, just kind of remove it, we're on the same trajectory that we had been prior. What happened last year is probably most of you saw either some decreases or some fluctuations in your enrollment, but the online schools did not. They saw huge increases. And so while the state as a whole wasn't really growing last year, didn't have much growth and struggled with enrollment last year, charters grew more last year from the prior year than they had been in recent times. And so when those charter schools had to get back within their caps, and just as districts started getting their own online programs, that enrollment dropped. And that is what caused the drop from the prior year. There actually was a small increase. Again, charter school enrollment tends to be leveling out. We've seen that for the last few years. But if you just take out last year and you look from, school year 2020, 2019, 2020 to this school year, 2022, even though it's still 2021, but this school year, if you just take that out, there is a slight increase in enrollment. And so if you get asked those questions, or if people are complaining and saying, oh no, the sky's falling, charter school enrollment is going down, it isn't, at least not the trend. It is pretty much stable and leveling out. And then the Board of Education met last week. They're working a lot on their legislative priorities. I understand those of you who were at the UAPCS meeting that you talked about this. One of the things that in the state charter school board's last meeting that we supported was to see if we can get reports decrease and also would like to see the charter school administrative funding what we're looking at and what it seems is going to happen is that it's just going to continue as it was last year, and then they're going to look at it for in the future of how to handle charter school administrative funding and small district funding. But it looks like whatever was the stopgap for that happened last year, that they're looking to just continue that. The other thing is that the state charter school board supported is the additional funding to make full day kindergarten an option for every school. So that's another thing that is being looked at. As far as USBE, they're dealing with, of course, a lot of things in the broader education, and they're working on their funding priorities right now. And so that's just kind of some general updates. Any questions?
Can we talk about the bus as a fee issue?
You want to talk a little more about that? So I know that there's been a lot of talking about buses, but what do you mean by buses?
My understanding is that the consideration is turning because if bus money comes through the school, it needs to be treated as a fee and therefore a waivable cost for schools, for charter schools.
So I can tell you in general, school fees is one of those topics that's being taken up. And there is a request, I think that USB, I think it's right now on their priorities, and it'll probably end up being one of their priorities, is to request additional funding to help with school fees and then make it so that you can't charge school fees. We do know, and we had school fees come to one of our directors meetings, was it last month, was the month prior?
It was 2 months ago.
Yeah, 2 months ago, and we've been working with them. I know that they stated that if you're asking for even volunteer hours from your parents and you put a certain number, that's a fee. They're just looking at a lot of things. We've been talking with our attorney and the Attorney General's office about what constitutes a fee. As far as your specific question, I don't have an answer right now, but definitely if you are at all interested in school fees, I would suggest stay tuned and keep an eye out, because that is something that is being discussed right now. Any other questions? Just wanted to say thank you for coming. It's wonderful to see your faces and not just your computer names on the screen. And it's also to see all of us, right? I mean, we all have actual legs and you know, from the shoulders up. So welcome, thank you for coming, and I hope you enjoy the meeting and training today.
Thank you. All right, next we have Joy Lynn. So Joy Lynn, do you want to come up and share any important information with from the association?
So super excited to be here. Our next training will be on December 7th. It's school culture, developing loyalty with parents and students. That will be up in Cache Valley. And we'll send out the location on that for sure to those of you that like to attend. Those of you that can't drive up there, we will have an online presence. So you can join on Zoom. Those in person, I will feed you lunch. Those of you on Zoom can eat peanut butter and jelly or whatever you would like, but that's super excited. And then we will be kicking off our book clubs in January. If there's a book that you would really like to have discussed during book club, will you please shoot me an email at joylyn@utahcharters.org, and we will put that into the rotation. So those are the things we have coming up.
Thank you. All right. We do have our, in case you missed it, and I was happy to report that November is kind of a quiet month, like knock on wood before I say that, but it's seeming kind of quiet as far as things to be aware of. We did have our November newsletter come out. You'll notice it has a whole new look and feel, and that is partly due to our new office assistant that we have, Joanne, that you met last month. So please check out the November newsletter. It's got a lot of great information in it. Sarah Wibke did send out a Midas update. So if you are using Midas to manage your professional development for your teachers, make sure that you are aware. It looks like one of the forms is being retired and replaced with one that aligns better with some of their priorities, and that all happens today. So if you're not aware of that, make sure you find this email. If you need me to resend it to you, let me know. I'm happy to forward that on from Sarah, and we can make sure that you get the information you need there for that. Kind of some fun news. She also sent out about a Pbs Kids Marathon that opens in December. So I assume if you would like to participate in that, you would need to get your kids the information this month in November. There's some reading logs, but it gets them entrance to a lot of different places. So could be a fun morale booster for your school to take place in your reading marathon. Also, there were a number of emails that came from Lisa Young. And so I just wanted to touch on these. If you are looking for professional development or resources, that's a lot of what her emails are addressing for you. So she specifically in the last few weeks sent one about a school leadership development community of practice. So if that's a topic that interests you, make sure that you are getting in touch with Lisa Young. She also sent one about central office transformation. So if you use a central office or could use some professional learning for your central office staff, that might be something you'd like to get some information from her about, as well as an early mathematics coaching institute. So again, if you need any of these resources, I've got the names on here of who you would reach out to, or if you can't find that, I'm happy to get you connected and into the right place. Your portfolio manager is also a great person on that. I was talking to one of our new directors just before our meeting started and pointed out your portfolio manager is like your go-to person for any question or concern. They can always get you pointed to the right place. So make sure you are using them and using them to their full capacity. William's going to be talking about this a little bit later on, but I'm sure you know with your teacher, sometimes you can announce the same thing lots of times. And so we're hoping one of these times will be the novel time that sticks. There's an upcoming OPMA campaign. And so William will explain what that means as far as a campaign. Really, the fancy way to think about it is just something we're looking at, something we're going to be checking on for our schools. So this you have until Friday, November 19th to have everything updated for the OPMA campaign. And then the staff will be looking at your websites and some specific things. This is a very short list here, but kind of the big ones to look for, making sure you have your board member contact information, the minutes of your meetings, that your meetings are being properly noticed. OPMA, of course, is Open Public Meeting Act. And like I said, William will provide some additional information on that. Joylyn?
The look back, how far are you looking back? Like 1 year, 2 years?
That's an excellent question. How far are we looking back?
With like your meeting minutes and things like that, those really need to be complete and like access to those. As far as like what's on the Utah Public Notices website, like October, September of this year going forward now. So just
our board packets, if we hadn't just made them available to those that arrived, but now we're transitioning to making them available online. If we just have that through this school year.
As long as it's clear to whoever's going there, like as the public is saying, like if it says we're current from here to here is available on our website, and then from this date until this date is available in this way. That way the public knows how they're getting there. Jennifer, you want to add to that?
Clarify. You of course have to look backwards to be able to see if you have been doing it. But what we're most interested in is getting people to what's right and to follow it here on out. So if you haven't been doing it, this is the opportunity now to fix it moving forward. And so we of course will have to look backwards. I don't think we're going more than a year. Is that the upside?
Yeah.
So we will be looking and assessing, have you been doing it like over the past year? If you haven't, then what we're gonna do is we're just gonna work with you so that you are now starting to do it. And that's the whole purpose of this. It's not to catch you if you haven't been doing it. It's to let's get good going forward. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Perfect. So not a gotcha, but a support. If you need some help getting ready for that, again, your portfolio manager is a great resource. You are also welcome to reach out to myself or William or really anyone in our office. We're happy to get you help with that if you have questions as you're preparing for that campaign. We also have our upcoming training and support from the State Charter School Board. We're so happy that you're here today. We have actually Vice Chair Bowles from our State Charter School Board, and he's going to be doing today's training that will start roughly at 2:30. And he's going to be talking about feedback for impact and how you can really drive learning at your schools. Some other things that are happening this month, our board member training is about composition and recruitment. Of course, you are welcome to always attend any of these and make sure that the word gets out to your board members or your teachers. We'd love to have as many people there as we can. The rest of the trainings this month will be over Zoom. So this was our one in person this month here. For our teachers, we have classroom games. That is not on the fourth Thursday like it normally is, because if you're paying attention to your calendar, fourth Thursday is Thanksgiving. Figured as much as your teachers love us and love PD, they probably don't want to join us on Thanksgiving. So it will be third Thursday this month. And this will also be with one of our board members, Stephanie Spiker, and she'll be talking about how to bring meaningful games into the classroom. And then for our business and our administrators, some of you, I think, fill both of those hats. We have our fall training coming from USBE this month. Next month, just looking ahead, we know that December is very busy. So there will be some videos coming out rather than a bunch of in-person trainings for December. So we're excited to get you this great information. From some of our vendors, we have our Board Leadership Academy sessions 3 and 4 coming up. Hopefully you were able to join us last week. We had Special Agent Sandra Ennis here to talk about fraud prevention. We are in the process of getting that video converted. So if you weren't able to join us, that video will be coming out soon. Next month, we have a special training with Rich Hagland of RH3 Consulting, and he will be talking about risk management. Again, you're hearing it from lots of different people, so you can find kind of the flavor or variety that works best for you and for your school and that honors the differences in our different charters. But some more risk management training, we'd love to have you participate in that. And then Joylene announced there's, I believe she's putting together some updated flyers, so watch for that for our upcoming UAPCS trainings. With Brian Carpenter, we have our Brian Carpenter Symposium going. If that's something that you're interested in participating in later on, please let us know. Our symposium is currently running, but we would love to kind of start putting together a list of schools that are interested in doing that in the future. And then our Ed Direction best practices in early literacy will be happening in January. So more information coming on that soon. And that takes care of our announcements. Yay. All right. Any questions on that before I turn the time over? We have Laura Lee, Natalie, and Jordan who are going to be talking about SLPs and special education directors. And I believe Natalie is joining us online. So any questions before I move on to that? Okay. Natalie, are you? I believe she's here. Yep, Natalie is on our call. Okay.
I'm here.
Oh, you're right there.
Yes.
Even better. I was like, where is she? I don't know.
wanna give Natalie a heart attack.
Perfect. Okay. Take it away.
You want me to go to Zoom and? see this?
So yes, because we're
Okay.
recording. Sorry.
No, that's totally fine.
little
It'll just
tricky
take
this
me a
morning.
minute to do that, if that's okay.
Perfect. And then I will stop sharing on this one. Yep. Okay.
Let's see, let me find it first.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Oh, of course, thank you. Oh, it's just perfect.
Okay, then you should have the screen sharing already turned on. Right?
Do I need to turn my volume on? I sure do. Okay.
And I'll turn this one so we're not picking you up.
There we go. Oh, I'm echoing though. Just. I'm gonna take you off.
Perfect.
Okay, that should take care of it.
Perfect.
Okay, sure. All right, hopefully. Oh, that's sharing something. Okay, let's see if it can go in presenters mode. And if not, I'll just keep it on the side. It's not a big deal. All right, well, we'll just keep it on the side. Well, hello, my name is Laura Lee Gillespie. I am the Utah Program Improvement Planning Specialist Coordinator. You probably are like, what in the world does that mean? It also is very often referred to in the special education world as UPIPs. So I specifically work with our compliance team here at the Utah State Board of Education to ensure that we are compliant with special education rules. And what we want to talk to you about today is partly special ed directors and speech language pathologists, but I'm going to kind of talk about all of the related service providers because often in your settings, you will have people contracted to do this work. And this is a very common thing that we see across the board. It's not unusual for anyone to see. But what we want to just be cautious with and make you aware of is just some of the things that you want to be careful with when it comes to liability. Now, I am an attorney, but I am not giving legal advice today, and I want to just be clear about that. I am going to walk you through the rules and the requirements. Natalie Fisher works with me. She's just on kind of as a support. Jordan DeHaan is our dispute resolution specialist. And you've probably run into all of us at some point or another. If you haven't, you will. The monitoring occurs across the whole state. We cover 160 plus local education agencies. And so I'm sure at some point, if we haven't been at your school, we will be at your school. So if you have seen me before or seen part of my team, hello again, we're back. So common contracted services that we see when we're coming out and monitoring in special education include the speech language pathologists, occupational therapists, physical therapy, behavior support. There's others, but these are the most common. And then we sometimes will see the special ed director being contracted out. We're going to kind of save the special ed director and talk about that at the very end. What we're mostly going to refer to right now is our areas of related service providers in the special ed rules. So when we're talking about that, that can be a lot of things, but generally speaking, when we're referring to individuals who are being contracted in your schools, it's those 4 that are listed right there on the slide. And I did provide this to Marie, so she can provide the slides to you if you would like them later. Under Utah special education rules and under the Utah Administrative Code, there's qualifications for related service personnel. And essentially it is kind of common sense, but it is that we are doing state approved or state recognized certification, licensing, registration, comparable requirements to the professional discipline. Now, there are some of your folks who are related service providers who may be licensed through the Department of Professional Licensing. This is a very narrow group, and you'll want to look through the administrative code regarding that group. But in terms of our special education rules and the rules that the Utah State Board of Education follows, I've listed them on every slide, so you're welcome to look at them. Utah special education rules are administrative rules. They are incorporated through R277750 for those of you who are interested in that, but they're so large that if they tried to put them on an administrative rule, it would be about 200 pages. So we keep it in its own book, and I'm happy to send that to you if you would like it. So first of all, you want to ensure that those who are contracting with your school are licensed appropriately. So when we come and do monitoring, we want to ensure that those licenses are appropriately licensed to do the services that they have been assigned to do by your LEA. So just one thing to be cautious about, you're going to want to make sure that they have the license available to support what they're doing. With that being said, generally, they are providing related services, which again, what does that mean? Well, the special ed rules say that they are services required to assist a student with a disability to benefit from special education. Now, that seems like common sense, but if you go into the actual definition and all of the definition, it will describe for you counseling services, speech and language pathology, occupational therapy, all of these different services, and they're all defined as far as what they can do and what they can't. So if you want this actual reference here, will get you to those pieces of the puzzle. I'm only bringing this up because your related service providers are there to help support your special education team, okay? They are there to here, we're providing a student special education and we see that there's a need for a related service. Typically, the most common in special ed is speech. And sometimes speech is the special education service, if that's the only service that a student needs. So again, be cautious and aware about the qualifications of your staff who are providing these related services and ensure that they have an understanding of their role. I'm going to tell you the contractors that I know of throughout the state are all awesome. I haven't had anybody in any situation where I've been really concerned about this. But we do know that there's lots of questions that are coming through with licensing and so forth, as you're all aware, and we are just trying to help you to be cautious with what might come. Now, any questions so far? I know this is really text heavy and legal heavy, but it is what it is. So I'd do a song and dance number, but it would probably bore you. So we'll just go with what we have. All right, paraeducators and paraprofessionals. This is where things get a little bit sticky. A paraeducator is can assist as long as they're trained and supervised to assist in the provisions of special education related services. Now, this is where it gets a little tough. You've got contractors and they're limited. We know that. We don't have lots of speech language pathologists looking for work across the state. They're pretty high demand. Psychologists, same way, occupational therapists, we know that. It's a problem. And I don't know if I can, you got it? Okay. With that being said, your paraeducator shouldn't be doing the role of a related service provider. And what I mean by that is if you've got a student who's on an individualized education program, or what we often refer to as an IEP, and there's related services involved, a paraeducator can assist with those related services as long as they are trained and supervised, but they shouldn't be responsible for those related services. It's the same with special education services. They can assist, but they're not allowed to do it completely or solely on their own. And frankly, if I was a paraeducator or a paraprofessional, I'd be very uncomfortable doing that on my own. But often we're limited on time and our contracted personnel may not be able to be there as often as they would like to. Just be very cautious about this. I know paraeducators are in high demand as well. We're struggling to get them hired, but just don't put things on them that they really aren't qualified to do. Yes. If they're substitute, well, there's not specifics in the rules, so I better start with that. But a substitute is obviously a temporary, usually an emergency situation, right? So we do the best we can with the circumstances. Now, that being said, I would be cautious if you've got a teacher that's going to be out 6 months. You may want to have somebody consulting with them in a substitute role. Good question. Yeah. They do not. Again, you've got to remember trained and supervised and assisting, right? So when I say that, that would mean that your primary person is that related service provider and the paraeducator is supporting them and providing those services. So I would, if I'm looking at it in an experience, let's use speech because that's the main one. I'm going to expect to see a speech provider providing services, and then maybe they're doing a follow-up with a paraeducator doing the same thing. Great question. Yes. I'll try to. So what I'm hearing you ask is that when we have a paraeducator who, not a paraeducator, a related service provider who, as a contracted person, wants to be online rather than in person. That's a discussion that you will have to have with that individual. The question that I would have from a special ed perspective is, are you going to be able to provide the student a free, appropriate public education in a virtual setting? Well, then you do it online, right? I think we've gotten really savvy with the online methods, and frankly, you can typically do these services. Physical therapy, not so sure, but your speech language pathology, that's very common online virtual service nowadays. Good question. Other questions? Okay, all right. So just keep that in mind. Keep in mind that you want to ensure that whatever you're doing, that you're documenting those trainings that are given to them, service or supervision, and how they're being used to assist. All right. So R277324 is our rule regarding paraeducators. And this doesn't just apply to special educators, this applies to all paraeducators, but there is some special education parts that are pretty specific. I'm only cutting out a small area of the rule here. And again, this just goes back to that training, supervision, and support to paraeducators. We don't want to put them in a place of liability where they're being held responsible for services they're not qualified to do. This part of the code basically says that they may not select or administer formal diagnostic or psychological instruments. That really seems like common sense. I do recognize that. I recognize I'm speaking to some very smart people, so you're probably sitting there going, that, duh, of course that's true. But we need to ensure that everyone understands that your person who's qualified to do testing, whether that's speech testing, psychological testing, cognitive testing, should be the person administering those. And from a special ed lens, we always go to the publisher. So whatever the publisher tells us, Pearson's a very common publisher for special ed testing. If they tell us certain people are qualified to do the testing, we go with what they've told us. That's what the rules tell us to do. So we always follow those. But this is in our rules now. They may not be responsible for selecting or prescribing educational activities without supervision and guidance. Again, whether that's a teacher or a related service provider, they should be guiding the work of a paraeducator. They can't be solely responsible for designing lesson plans. And I think the one that really is very specific to special ed, and it's outlining it, is be assigned to implement elements of an individualized education program without direct training, supervision, and involvement of qualified teachers or related service providers. So again, we don't turn the IEP over to a paraeducator under the direction of a contracted individual to provide those services. They can assist in doing so, but they shouldn't be solely responsible. Right. Special education directors. Now, this is a very different piece of the puzzle. So related service providers are very clearly outlined in the special ed rules. They're very specific. They, all of these things, special education directors are something that have been somewhat created by us. And what I mean by that is that the work of special education is so significant that you have to have someone who's doing the administrative work of it. And some of you realize that, and you now have someone that's specifically hired on at your local education agency to be that special ed director. Others have included it as part of administration, like an assistant principal is also the special ed director. But when you're a startup school, often you don't have the ability to have a special ed director. And we will use outside agencies to act in that role of the special ed director. It's completely fine to do that. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But I want to just walk you through some guidance about that special ed director and that role. This is a TA document that we developed a couple of years ago because we had some questions around our monitoring. Essentially, the question was, well, why are you needing to even interview a special ed director if they're being contracted from outside of the school? Well, the same applies to our related service providers. If we come to monitor at your school and we need to interview related service providers, we don't look at it and say, oh, they're contracted, they're not contracted. We will interview the related service provider. It doesn't matter to us as USBE whether or not you've contracted or have not contracted. So the question came up, well, what about special ed directors? What if we're doing that with a special ed director? The rule is still the same. If we come and do an interview of the special ed director, whether they're a contracted individual or someone that's on your staff. So the question came from a contracting company, and it came kind of as a question of liability. And so we developed this TA document about special education directors and monitoring visits and their role in the local education agency, and when we come to monitor, what we're looking for. Now, I want to clear up something about monitoring. UPIPS, Utah Special Education and Program Improvement Planning, is monitoring. It is not auditing. Everyone refers to us as auditors, and we're not. What our role is to come in and to look and see, check up with you. In fact, quite often we ask your special ed directors to have us come and sit right next to your teachers and do the file reviews together. Because frankly, if you're having challenges, then so are we. And the reality is we want to help your LEAs to be successful. Now, I know you're like, yeah, she's from the state board. Of course, she's going to say that. No, I'm not kidding about that. And I know that some of you in this room have been through a monitoring visit before. And I will tell you, my team, we work really hard to build those relationships because monitoring is really an opportunity for us to ensure that we are working together to improve outcomes for students with disabilities. So I'm just putting that out there so that you know, when we come, we will say monitor all the time, and most people will say audit, and we'll just keep saying that the different things, because an audit is more of a, we're not talking to you, we're just getting what we need to find out about you. But that being said, special ed directors would be interviewed, but our purpose in monitoring is to understand the local education agency. So when you have a monitoring visit from us, we come in, we interview a special ed teacher, we interview a general ed teacher, we'll interview related service providers, we'll interview your special ed director, principal. Those 5 are always part of the interviews. Now, of course, depending on the size of your school, we may interview more of those folks or less of those folks, depending on what your school population is. That being said, when we're talking about a special ed director, we're not going there to find out what their contracting feeling is about it. We're going there to find out about the school. So as a special ed director, we would ask that they come in as a contractor and tell us about the school, not about their experience overall contracting wherever they are, about your specific school. We also leave it to the judgment of your local education agency. So in other words, if you're contracting a special ed director, but you're concerned that because they're contracted in some way that maybe they're not going to give a true reflection of your local education agency, you are welcome to select somebody else to take that interview. We are fine with that. That's your decision. So that's kind of some information on that. I'm not going to go through all of this information, but just if you are interested, again, I sent this all to Marie, so you're welcome to review this and get a better perspective on what that's all about. The final piece that I just kind of want to review with you, though, is FAPE. So when we talk about special education, it almost goes hand in hand. We've used that acronym FAPE, or Free Appropriate Public Education, because that's really what all the legal and litigation comes around. Was the educational plan developed appropriate for the student? Is it appropriate to meet the student's needs? So here's my word of caution for you. If something happens with your contractor not providing services, we're not going to come after the contractor. The contract is between you and the contractor. We will expect that the LEA is providing that free appropriate public education. Okay, so if we have a concern about some sort of service being provided, or Jordan is usually the one who has concerns because he gets all the dispute resolution fund. When he gets a concerning complaint of some sort, he's going to come to your LEA. He's not going to go to the contractor. Okay, now that doesn't mean you don't have some disputes to deal with a contractor, but from our perspective, we are looking for that services being provided by your LEA as a whole. So just keep that in perspective when you're contracting out things. Again, I fully recognize we have to do this because of the nature of the world we live in and the number of people that are available to do these jobs. It's next to impossible to do them without the support of those contractors. So just keep that in mind. So if you hear from Jordan and it's something related to this, you want to be very aware that again, it's going to be a question for your LEA. Local education agencies have that obligation. FAPE is an obligation of your school or your charter or for those of you who have multiple schools. So you just want to keep in mind that as you're thinking about this, that you're ensuring that those that you contract with are providing the services that you agreed to, that they're supervising and training those that they're working with to assist in the provision of services, and that you're ensuring that students are receiving FAPE. Do you have any questions for me? I gave you some time back. All right, well, my information is on here and I'm happy to talk to any of you at any time. This is my passion, so I'm happy to do anything that you need. So thanks. It's okay. It's okay. It's all right.
Right. Okay, well, next, we are running a little ahead of schedule. So let's see if Sam, I do see that he's on our Zoom room here. Sam, are you ready to go or would you like another minute?
Yeah, you bet. Can you hear me okay?
I know you can't see all of us, but you're in a nice room full at Basement West. You're up on all the big screens, so super exciting.
Well, great. I should have come into the office this morning because I was having all sorts of troubles with my VPN, but anyway, so sorry I'm not there in person, but it's nice to be with all of you virtually. All right, I just wanted to introduce myself to, I know some of you having been at a couple of charter schools recently, but just wanted to introduce you and kind of let you know what we've been working on. So Sam Uri, my email is sam.uri, U-R-I-E, at schools.utah.gov. My cell phone is 801-793-0092. Feel free to contact me and my team anytime you need anything. And if we don't have the answer, we'll find it for you or help you find that. Just a couple of things from my team. So my team has the school finance specialists. Each of your charter LEAs should have a school finance specialist, and your business administrator should know who that is. It's either Laura Wilson, John Palmer, or Dallin Penier. So if you have a new BA or a recently changed BA, reach out to us, let us know. We can set up some training and have them get face-to-face with their school finance specialist. Anyway, so just thank you to all of the charter schools who turned in your UPEFs reporting on time. We look forward to meeting with you on we'll get to our audit reviews as soon as possible and try to get those out sooner this year so that you can make any adjustments that you need to within your LEA. My team also consists of transportation specialists. If you have transportation in your district, you might know Ron Litchfield. Just a reminder, and we sent a memo out about this, but never, unless it's a multifunction school activity bus, which meets certain requirements of a school bus, you can have more than 10 passengers in one of those vehicles without a CDL, but otherwise, if your LEA has 12 passenger vans or 14 passenger vans, those are illegal and need to be out of service immediately. So contact us if you have any questions on that or have any needs with transportation. Additionally, my team does the minimum school program, the allotment memos, and we work a lot with the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget and the Legislative Fiscal Analyst's Office to, advocate for all schools, but charter schools as well, and just so those are some of the things that we work on. We are bringing on an economist here soon, so hopefully we can get working on some of our funding formulas to make those more equitable. And anyway, I think that was mostly all that I had. Just one quick reminder, and I know Marie's probably talked to you about this, but just make sure that your BAs are providing your board with a monthly budget to actual report, and that's getting put with your board backups on your website. I think the SCSB folks are going to be checking on that this year, but just make sure that's just good practice for your your BA to be communicating with your board and just knowing how you're doing on a month-to-month basis. So I think that is all that I had prepared. I'd love to answer any questions while I'm here.
Perfect. Thank you, Sam. We'll open it up for any questions. Let's see if there are any. You may have dazzled them with your knowledge. Yeah, we've got a rookie coming in. So go ahead.
I'm sorry, you probably already explained this, but I was like, dazzled. What is his role?
Okay. The rookie question is, what is your role, Sam?
Oh, sorry. So my title is School Finance Director. So I kind of help coordinate the school finance team within financial operations at USPE. So
Perfect.
Does that help?
Last name is Yuri.
Yuri, U-R-I-E. Elementary school was unfortunate because Corel Word Perfect auto-corrected it to urine, but anyway.
That is rough, Sam.
I got over it, so.
They say they will not forget. That was a great tool to help everyone.
Great.
Any other questions that we have while we have Sam online with us? Okay, that looks like that's it.
Okay, yeah.
Sam, we appreciate you popping in for a virtual introduction.
Yeah, thank you, Marie. Thank you, charter directors. Again, reach out to us. We'd love to come visit you, come visit your BA. If there's anything that you need, if you feel like your board needs some training on some things, reach out to us and we'll get that scheduled for you. We're here to help and support. And I just came from 2 charter LEAs, and so I anyway, try to take the charter input into everything that we do. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. Well, we are still running wonderfully ahead of schedule, which is great. I do see that our next presenter is not here quite yet. So when Mark hops on, will you let me know? Thank you. In the meantime, we did have two of our charter director colleagues that sent in a question that they were hoping that we could discuss together today. So this kind of presented itself as some perfect time for that. So the first question that came in was, what are you doing about truancy? So recognizing that some of our favorite little friends may really be struggling with getting to school or struggling with getting online if you're doing a virtual option. And so they're wondering from the, what are you doing about truancy? And if anyone would be willing to share on that. I'll go ahead and pose the second question too, so you've got some time to think. Really, this can be sharing, brainstorming. If you need to just air your grievances, like, yeah, truancy is hard at my school too. You know, sometimes there's at least that strength in numbers to know it's not just you. The other question, I'm sure we all are struggling here, substitutes. What are you doing about substitutes? And so these two colleagues that asked these questions from the field are just hoping that maybe there will be some ideas that we can share with each other or at least commiserate together. So truancy or subs, kind of related, just how do we get people to our schools? So we'll kind of open that up for a problems of practice discussion, and anything that we want to share would be great here. Go ahead.
So lots of phone calls, emails, invitations to meet with parents. And what's been mostly successful, we've hesitated to make a call to Child and Family Services, but we have made a couple of those in extreme cases where we've reached out, and just not gotten communication back from the parents. And one of those was successful in getting. So, you know, that it's a lot of legwork.
Perfect.
For us.
Awesome. I'm not sure if audio is picking up everything, so I'll just repeat real quick.
Yeah.
Phone calls, lots and lots of phone calls, like work. Maybe, you know, most of the time they're not doing a referral over to DCFS, but if they know the family, or it seems like there are times that it is more appropriate, they've made those referrals. Doing that legwork and helping seems to be getting those students to come back. The DCFS call did help for one of their students. Did I capture that correctly?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Robin.
We've done some additionally to that, like our resource officer will do some welfare checks and send it to local. We encompass a couple of towns, so they'll send their local police force just to do a welfare check for us. But we've also divided into two categories. Is truancy also academic related, so they're like failing their courses, or are they keeping up and passing, but they may have some things going on? So then our academic specialist kind of takes over with, you know, if they're also failing their courses, that's a whole different animal. But if they're still passing and keeping up, whether it's virtually and they're just not on campus due to something that maybe we don't know. A lot of parents are hesitant to tell you now if the kid has COVID. We've done this now for a year. I don't know why we're still at that stage, but for whatever reason, they're not feeling well. And then they're gone for, you know, and when we get close to that 10-day mark, then we're calling and saying, okay, we really need to put a plan here together. So what's really going on? So it's a lot of phone calls that way, but that's kind of how we like split it. So if they're passing in things, then that's a whole different conversation. If they're failing and not coming.
Perfect. So just to recapture that, it sounded like school resource officers can help with welfare checks and just making sure that the family's okay. And that they've also found some success with dividing up the truancies. If it's you're truant, but you're doing okay academically, that's one problem. But if it's truancy and failed academics, that's, you know, a different problem, and making sure that that academic advisor is helping with that as well. Great ideas. Thank you. Home visits. Are you finding success there?
Well, we have found answers, not necessarily success.
Okay.
As far as the child come back to school.
So finding answers with home visits, maybe not them coming back,
Yeah,
but
sometimes it's the answer to understand what's happened. You know, the family actually left and no one knew.
okay. So sometimes families are leaving and just not communicating that. Go ahead. Were you raising your hand? Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, please. Let's do it. We would love to add to this question.
I'm curious what other schools do with the attendance drop when students want to come back in. I've got a few families that have figured out, especially at an online school, how to kind of manipulate that game a little bit, and we'll log in on the 9th day, or not at all, and then call and say we want back in, and it happens over and over and over, and I will pass.
Woo, I'm following it. So just as a recap, families that kind of play the system, 9 day, 9 day, 9 day. How do we manage that? That's adding to our question. So go ahead.
Not a great answer for the 9 day players, but in order to return to membership, we always have a conference. Mandatory.
We've done that.
Right.
Until they meet with the principal and maybe create some sort of like academic success plan. Exactly what that. Yep.
Perfect. So the idea was to have the family meet with the principal or an academic director, someone to create a plan for success, to make sure that they're coming back successfully. Sounds like that would probably need like a policy or something to support you doing that. But a great idea.
Can I add one more clarification?
Go ahead, Mandy. Let's do it.
We have a wait list. So my question is, if you drop a student, my understanding is they're still our student, we have to save that spot, and we aren't able to add somebody on the wait list and that person got membership.
William, any thoughts on that?
Hi, sorry, we're trying to get somebody else. Can you say that again? What was?
I can recap it because we need it for the computer here. Okay, so student drops. Their understanding is that the student is still theirs. However, they've got a wait list. Are they able to add someone from the wait list? Do they have to hold that spot for that student, even though it's been over their 10 days?
That's a great question.
That's what I was thinking too.
I feel like we should run upstairs and go get the enrollment. Yeah.
This is exactly what happened to us.
Is it?
So we had a brother, sister, didn't show up. We did a home visit. And that was the whole point, is the sister was coming at one point. The brother stopped coming. And then the sister stopped coming. And so we just did the home visit before the 10 days for the sister. But the brother had been at like 11 days before we actually got somebody out there. And then the idea is that we have room now, right? We want to bring the next child in.
Right.
And so we moved forward and brought that next child in because we had not had any contact. So, and then when we did get contact, well, it was confrontational, you know, like, why are you at my house kind of thing. And we're like, your child's not going to school. Well, they're not your concern anymore. Yeah, but they're still on our books, if you will, right? They're still show up for us because you haven't registered them anywhere else. And the statement from the dad was, well, we're going to figure out what to do. You don't need to come over anymore. Yeah, but you still have a child that is not in school, that is 7 years old, that was in our school. And so we explained that. The email that came after that was long with, you know, who do you think you are? And tell me what
Colorful language,
yeah.
yes.
Anyway, the point is that they stated to us that they were removing the children from school. They're going to do a homeschool, so they don't need to go anywhere else. And we had already brought someone in because we have children that need to be in. And that's kind of I don't know now what's gonna happen because that child is still showing up on my LEA. And it hasn't been pulled from anywhere else.
Okay, we've got a few more to weigh in on that. This is a good question. And if we don't feel like it's completely resolved, we will get an answer today too.
And Marie,
Do you
just so you
wanna-
know, it looks like your microphone's picking all of this up, so you don't.
I don't need to keep recapping.
I mean, you
Perfect.
can if you want to, but most likely.
I am totally good to let you speak for yourselves. Do you want to go first? And then I saw your hand in the back as well.
Yeah, I would say for Megan, it's a funding question. So if you go over, then you may not be funding for them. So that's the decision you kind of make that way.
Let's say they're going homeschool. There's code for that.
Yeah.
So that could-
Yeah, but you need a homeschool affidavit.
Yep.
What we've done in situations similar to that is we have a staff member who's a notary. And they've expressed they're gonna homeschool, but they haven't signed the affidavit. So they will go to their home and notarize it.
Oh, that happens, okay.
That's a great
Excited
idea.
my staff will be to go over there again.
You can hire.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, it is what it is, it needs to happen, so, okay, that's good.
Perfect.
That's pretty much what I was gonna say, is you can have them, if they're at the principal conference anyway, or if you're on the home visit anyway, just take the affidavit with you. Have it ready to go and have it, and then you can actually drop them from your records, both educational and non-professional.
I was trying to do that, that's kind of what I was like.
Probably that's the one stuff. That's in the-
Yeah, we do too.
Especially if they already said we're gonna homeschool.
I don't, this is the second time they've done that. They did it when the second grade was in kindergarten. They never homeschooled a child, so in second grade, again, doesn't know any sounds, anything. And I'm like, oh, I don't believe you.
And they can come back.
Yeah.
Frustrating. Yay.
For the answer on the substitutes, we've also hired academic assistants at 20 hours a week. And then use them to sub separately as a separate job description. And we also increased our sub to $25 for
Nice.
Increasing pay, I think, is important because it makes it more attractive for short visual era. But at the same time, I think appealing to the community, like in our case, we kind of like almost beg our parents, you need to be school hours, your kids are suffering, and that somehow some more.
It's a good idea to bring in that community buy-in. And
So I'll just piggyback on what Robin said. We do the same thing between Truancy and the academic side of it. And if you see on the academic side, we use our academic aids to test the family, and everything has to be done. We said we need to come in for a meeting. And do it in a face-to-face meeting. And if they're playing with the 10-day rule, we're pretty direct with them that if you can't be here for 10 days, then that's may not be the academic place for you. But that's in a face-to-face meeting.
nice. These are good ideas. Mask to mask. Yes. Nate, are you raising your hand?
Yeah. You guys have any success with certain triggers, having no grades, primarily for high school, obviously, but no grades being put in place for students who maybe on the academic track, they're doing okay academically, but obviously they're coming to the time coming.
It depends on what of our academic innovation, our academic interventions the family can partake in. So one of the things is we do tutoring after school. And we give the parent that option. We give them bus tickets. We run an after school bus. But it depends on what are the interventions the family and the student is willing to take. As to whether they come. A lot of times the parent doesn't know the student's not going to class or not walking in the when they drop them off. So the parents are all for the interventions, and that changes it. But now we have two people talking about it. But I would say it depends on what interventions the family chooses to do. having multiple people from multiple areas of the school, rather than just a registrar calling them about the truancy or missing class, has a lot to do with being clear about and being able to draw long-term data for a school as well as for them, that truancy leads to increased academic efficiency is key as well.
Great idea.
In my understanding that regards to enrolling a student over the top of somebody who's been unenrolled, so to speak, into culture education, is that we use those step funding source. So in essence, as long as you follow that process, you like to enroll, you transfer to homeschool or whatever, you can enroll a student in place of that student.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. And it would end up positively impacting your ADM. So it should end up helping more than, the kiddo not coming in. So.
And they would,
Then they're back in the water.
Jennifer.
No.
oh, we were so close.
We're talking about the families that try to play the 9-day bump on the 10-day rule.
So if they exceed the 10, you have to take them out of the membership that you are reporting to the state. However, if now, if that takes you over your cap, it's past October 1, so. But everything, when we talk to attorneys, when we talk to and just really delve into this, you can't refuse to that student. They aren't there, but you can't just.
Is there a time when would that be throughout for the rest of the year? Because they have a spot, or is it like a time? It's been 30 days or something.
We've never gotten into the details on that. It's just that if you had to drop a student because of the 10-day rule, and then they want to come back and they can't lose that seat.
Unless they can go somewhere else, like.
Yes, that's.
Well, then if they
yes.
don't like the new place, they want to come back. They've already did it.
Then they're on the lottery. Right.
Yes, then they would have to go back.
And does that include homeschool? So if they've gone ahead and signed the homeschool affidavit and then changed their mind, sorry, you already transferred to homeschool.
Correct, because that is basically them assuring that they've gone somewhere else.
So then they would re-enter your lottery at that point. Tyler.
The difficulty with that is if you have anything in your, not just your lottery, your admissions where siblings get in and you have a younger one that remains in, that becomes a problem as well.
Yes, and I do know from talking to some of you about individual circumstances where this has happened, we do know that there are some families who play the game. I don't know. I wish I had better answers than that. But
We're also accepting just commiserating with the group too.
yes.
So
The one thing that I can tell you is it does seem to be not for that to happen. That there's very few parents who are doing that, and so this is an outlier, and that's why I feel okay saying that even, and that's also why we give you that 3% leeway over your cap, right? Because if they are, we know that things like this happen, and we just need that.
let's go Tyler and then we'll come up to you, Brett.
We did ask that question when we were told it's the whole academic year. So it is, yeah. So it's that academic
Yes.
year.
Thank you. I was going to get to that. So, but if they have actually entered somewhere else or signed an affidavit, then no, they're now at that school. But yes, it does last for that entire year. You can't just go, well, it's been 30 days now. I can erase it.
What if I can't reach this parent again? To sign it?
So that's a really good point. But in that case, if you can't reach them, they're probably not going to be coming back anyway, right?
No, I'm just concerned for the children. I'm just thinking about, because they did the same thing with the boy when he was in kindergarten. And I'm like, oh my gosh, not both of them. So I was just curious about what would the state, whomever, whoever the power may be. How do we support these two children?
So, and that is what I understand the thinking behind that, even if the student, hits that 10-day rule, you can no longer report them in for funding for their review, that you can't just let them go. Because if you do, then that child just disappears, right? And no one's looking after them because the district doesn't know that, they were at your school. So that is the thinking. And that is, we're educators, we do care about students. And I do know in talking to so many of you, especially over COVID, where you were trying to get a hold of these students that just were not engaging. And sometimes you were successful, but I know a lot of times you weren't. And I think everyone appreciates the effort, but I think we also do recognize that sometimes it doesn't feel good.
Okay, I think we've got one more maybe, or we can do two more.
Does that mean that once they sign the homeschool affidavit, nobody's taking care of those kids or checking them out?
The parents are.
Just like the ones that work.
The homeschool affidavit is filed with their home district, and so then the district becomes responsible for the homeschool.
That is a good point. It used to be when I first started in other schools that they could not sign the homeschool affidavit or enter homeschool directly from a charter school. They had to go to their district and then enter homeschool. That has changed because of just logistics. But the reality is it is the district's responsibility because they're in their geographic area.
You send that affidavit to the district.
I don't know what happened. I just wondered, does anybody follow up with that family once that paper's on file? So is that normal for them, for the districts to follow up with those kids?
Yeah.
Not the districts that I work, I have to.
And we usually have to renew those affidavits every year. So once they've done that affidavit, it's going through their.
It is, because I just hope that they come back next year, I can do something different. I don't know what, but something for this little family.
Definitely. Brett, you want to give us a final question here?
Yeah, I did have a question, and it's separate, it's a different question. Are the sick leaves, do they have anything to do with the state level or anybody above that? So with COVID and with no extra bonus days off for COVID now by law, if we make an exception to our sick leave policy through the board and through me as the principal, does anyone else have to be notified, or is that just inclusive to our LEA?
My understanding that's an LEA thing. I know we don't have to be.
It's a private entity.
And is anybody else extending leave for COVID quarantines?
Yeah, we are.
We are, there is their funds we pay for the
I know.
service.
And are you going through your board on a case by case, or did you just make that?
We did at the administrative level, just we call it administrative leave.
Administrative level.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
One thing though, to our prior, that 10-day rule, you do know that that's unexcused absences. So if the absences and that what is unexcused is your own LEA policy. So if a student is say sick for 2 weeks, but that it is considered excused, that just.
Thank you. All right, I think that's been a good discussion. If we want to pick that up again next month and then keep talking about it, we certainly can. If you have other topics that you'd like to bring up and have your colleagues weigh in on, since we are a community here, please send those to me or talk to your portfolio manager. We can always brainstorm together. It kind of fit really nicely that we had that little bit of extra time because this leads really well into our next topic. We have Mark Comenducci here, and he is from the 305 Education Group. And they've done some innovative research around learning under quarantine. And he had some really interesting things that he shared with myself and a few other staff members. And we thought, we don't want this to be a sales pitch. So that's our caveat here, but we invited him to come and just share some of the data, some of the findings, some of what they're finding is working out of state. And if that's then something that you're interested in learning more about, you would of course have that option to connect with Mark or work with your own team on doing something to again help address the needs of your students. So Mark is, like I said, out of state, so he's joining us virtually. Mark, you're in a big auditorium room full of charter directors here today, and we've got you up projected on a bunch of screens. So once you start talking, it should bump over to you and we will let you present. I do have your screen share turn on as well if you'd like to share any slides. And we're excited to hear about learning under quarantine.
Sure, great. Thanks, Marie, and thanks for having me. I wish I could see everyone. I can't, so I'm just going to pretend it's just me talking to an empty room, which I feel like I do a lot of the time anyway. So I'm going to share my screen if it lets me here. Give me 1 second. So I caught the tail end of the conversation as you were wrapping up, and I think this fits really nicely based on some challenges and some interesting conversations we've been having with folks around addressing needs of both students, families, and educators during COVID and specifically around quarantines. So let me share this. And Marie, can you all see that?
We can, yeah, Mark.
Oh, great. Thanks, William. So
I think I'm muted, but yeah, we can see you.
Great. And can you see that? You can see the deck though, right?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah, we can.
All right. So to give you all just a real quick background, like Marie said, I am the founder and CEO of an organization called the 305 Education Group. Broadly, we work with educators, those who support educators and those who hold educators accountable across all three sectors. We work at the school level, network or district level, and also at the board and authorizer level. But as we've been grappling with the challenges of COVID, we were tasked with designing or co-designing a solution for a charter network, which is a 12-school network in Northeast Ohio, an urban network, in how they address the challenges related to specifically COVID quarantines this year as a part of their reopening plan. And through that, we talked about and designed a solution that addresses the acute need, but more importantly, we are beginning to work with other schools and districts on to utilize and tweak around addressing some traditional barriers around teaching and learning. But before we get into that, I'll just share a little bit of the process. So when we started this, the district, the client, the charter network was really clear, we need to provide some high quality learning opportunities to quarantine students. Just as a quick aside, they have a different plan when teachers are quarantined. So teachers work even if they have to quarantine, they work remotely. They have a different plan if entire grades or classes are quarantined. What this was really aimed at was if individual students need to quarantine, how can we ensure teaching and learning over that period of time, which is average of 10 days, especially in a school community where there has not been a high degree of chronically absent students year over year. So all of a sudden they were anticipating, and unfortunately they were correct, that there would be a lot of students that were missing school this year that have normally never missed 10 days over the past 5 years combined. So that was the sort of the why of this work. When we began the co-designing process. We think it's really important that when we work with schools and individual schools or networks, that we think about those that are going to have to implement the solution, which in this case are largely educators, and those that are going to be impacted by the solution, which in this case are students, families, and educators. So through that, we began the process of talking to key stakeholders. And what started as a really easy question, provide high quality learning to quarantine students, became much more complex based on some of these things we heard. So you can see, I'm not going to read through them all, but essentially we have some key findings that we found when we talked to students, families, or educators that went well beyond like, we just need to provide high quality learning, right? And some of this was around state guidance or requirements. Some of it was around, what works for students best when they can't come into school. Some of it had to do with the alignment to scope and sequence. Some of it had to do with re-entry. But these, as we dug a little bit deeper with students and with families and with teachers and school leaders, these are some of the key areas we found that we needed to address when we were designing the solution. And I think just to frame, like the baseline was, it needs to be better than sending home worksheet packets. And the other end of the spectrum was, we can't create a burden for teachers where they are now teaching like in-person kids and remote kids either simultaneously or having like two very different jobs throughout the course of the day. So that was sort of like the frame and sort of how we were thinking about what the solution could look like based on all these things that we learned when we talked to families, when we talked to students, when we talked to educators. Let me pause there. I think if anyone has questions, I'd be able to hear it. Are there any questions about sort of how we began this and what this project really was, what the foundation was, before we move on?
Mark, I'm not seeing any questions at this point.
Great. All right. So then this is essentially what the process looked like. So again, we did those listening sessions. This started last winter. Just for reference, this network, they were fully remote all last year, so they never reopened. So we were able to engage in these listening sessions remotely with students, with families, and with educators. And then simultaneously, we also were vetting national online learning partners that were going to be a part of the solution. And they were ultimately going to be a key partner in delivering what the solution turned out to be. Once that partner was identified, and again, we did some vetting, but ultimately the charter school network decided who they wanted to partner with. Last spring, we spent a lot of time looking at the network scope and sequence. They are a K-8 network, and figuring out how to build like these 2-week modules aligned to their scope and sequence, so that regardless of when a student's start date was for their quarantine, the teaching and learning that they received would be aligned to what they had just been doing, right, like the day before they went on quarantine. So that was really a key component of what this solution turned out to be. This idea that kids aren't only working asynchronously, they aren't just doing the equivalent of independent practice, i.e. worksheets or online programs by themselves, but in addition to asynchronous, adaptive, student-led work or programs, they would also receive individualized one-on-one or small group instruction that was directly aligned to what they had been learning when the day they went on quarantine. From there, the online learning partner, they hired some teachers for this. We worked with them to train their teachers on sort of like the culture and feel of this network. Simultaneously, on the network side, we had to train like their counselors, their school leaders in how we would operationalize this. And then we spent a lot of time, as you would expect, messaging to students and families that though we're reopening, we're going to be in person. We will have this option if your student does have to go on quarantine to ensure that their learning isn't interrupted any more than would naturally happen if a student can't come into school for 10 days. We launched in the fall. We were anticipating a fair amount of kids, as you'll see on the next slide. A lot more students have been quarantined than I think anyone anticipated. And then right now we are taking this solution with this network and with others and actually using it to address historical barriers to teaching and learning, which for me, like that's what gets me most excited about this. You'll see in a minute, but anytime like we design something, if it only addresses an acute challenge, we don't think that that's really a robust solution that really serves the education ecosystem. But we are already working with folks about how to take this and modify it for some of those historical barriers that impact students around, time and space, whether it's related to COVID quarantines or not. And then these are the results to date. So for this network, 7% of their student population have had to be quarantined. And of those students, 80 have participated in this program, this learning under quarantine. And then the most important you can see are the next 3 rows. So of the students that participated, 80% have done 50% or more of their live lessons. So what that means is the live lesson, it is anywhere from 1 hour and 1.5 hours, for kindergarten through 5th grade. And then for middle school, it's 2 hours a day. Those are scope and sequence aligned lessons that is being taught by an online teacher to the quarantine student, either one-on-one or in small group. And so again, 80% participated in 50% of those lessons. And then we had 71% do 100% of their online lessons. So just to take a step back, I mean, if you think about a normal school day, or if you were to do an online, if you were to do like a tutoring program, these students got, roughly 1.5 hours to 2 hours of one-on-one or small group instruction over 10 days. That is from my opinion, that's a lot of direct instruction time that these students got that they would not have received if the district was doing a more traditional approach to quarantine, which is sending home packets and or just having students do asynchronous work. And then at the bottom, you can see and again, all this data is just through the beginning of October, but through the beginning of October, over 400 hours of live instruction, largely one-on-one or small group, have been recouped for quarantine students. So this gets at like what we were really tasked with doing. How can we have a solution that doesn't put an additional burden on teachers, on students and families? It's above that bar of like worksheets, but it isn't creating a whole nother workflow for teachers that are also teaching their, the vast majority of their students in person at the same time. I heard you all talking about quarantine and some policies when I came in. Just to be clear, this one district that's doing this is in Ohio. This doesn't solve, the students are still marked absent like they would anyway. Ohio is a daily attendance funding state, so there is a funding implication when students are absent, whether it's excused or unexcused. But this network was thinking bigger for its stakeholders, where they were trying to design something that wouldn't be disrupted by COVID and by quarantine, even if it didn't solve every issue around compliance, meaning attendance rates, even if financially it was separate from the funding formula. But I think that's just important to say. I know, having been a charter network superintendent, having opened up new charter schools, having turned around charter schools, we can't ignore the compliance and the financial aspect. But this district was willing to invest some of their targeted funds specifically around ESSER and CARES around addressing the schooling loss that comes out of quarantine. And this was the decision that they made to do it. I'll pause again. Any questions? I know we don't have a ton of time, but any questions around the program or the results so far?
Good question. Mark, we do have one question.
Sure.
There we go.
I apologize if you covered this in your presentation, which thank you for that. So does this apply to kids who are in school and then are quarantined, so they go out and they do this program while they're on a quarantine and then they come back and sort of rejoin the regular class? Or is this a group of students who were sort of moved into this program for a longer period of time?
So there is no time constraint. It was designed for students in what you said first, going on quarantine, continuing scope and sequence aligned teaching and learning, more robust than worksheets, not totally asynchronous, with the idea that they would eventually be coming back. The length of quarantine has varied. We have some students where it's been 7 days. We have some where it's been up to 20 days and they've done this the entire period. But it was designed specifically for students that had a temporary disruption to in-person learning because of quarantining. Now, the modified and tweaked versions are being used with what you said second, students that may have extended absences or students that may have other reasons for not being able to come to in-person learning, but don't want to leave their school or their school community and go to a different solely online school, which I'll get to in a second. No other questions?
Nope, I think that was the last one, Mark.
Great. So as I referenced earlier, like we as an organization really believe that, you know, what it says here, right? If a solution is only addressing an acute need, it's, you know, it's not fiscally responsible, and bigger picture, like it's putting a lot of time and effort and resources into a very short-term option. So that's where, while we began this and while quarantine has been like the through line for all of this work, we're really excited about how schools are starting to think about this solution to address other historical barriers. And so here are some of them that we are either directly working, or we've heard others like take our idea and use it within their schools to address some of those barriers. And some of them are what you might think of, right? Like a suspension is very similar to a quarantine, right? With the difference being sometimes a quarantine, the genesis is beyond the student's control. With a suspension, we can argue it usually is, but how it's operationalized is the same, right? The student is removed from the school setting for a set number of days. Everyone keeps moving, and unfortunately the student isn't offered or isn't afforded the ability. Some districts, you know, have the ability for suspended students to go to an alternative site. Some just provide makeup work. We are seeing that this model is being used to address students that make some poor choices and have to be removed from school without having a massive disruption to their teaching and learning. Similar to chronically absent student or medically fragile students, where you have students that are actually unable or are not going into the school consistently. This has been a way to bridge that gap for them and ensure that they are getting some direct instruction that is scope and sequence aligned, and not having these big gaps in their learning over a longer period of time. We work with some alternative in high schools, where students cannot kind of participate in the traditional school day. So this has been a great version, a modified version of this has been great for addressing those students. And then the last two are really adult facing. We, like many of you, I'm sure, have been hearing a lot and have been trying to think creatively around staffing shortages. So how can schools rethink the adults that are in the building, leverage adults that are outside of the building, and really provide a robust and consistent opportunity for students to continue their teaching and learning. And then the same thing on teacher PD days. I think this is one of the most basic challenges that a lot of educators have grappled with for years, where, you know, it's a teacher PD day, we're investing in our staff, we're trying to make them more effective, we're building community, but unfortunately schools closed and we're not serving kids on those days. We have a client where they have 17 PD days throughout the year, sort of in every other Friday, and we are in the process of tweaking this for them so that students keep learning on those days while they're also teaching their own educators on those teacher PD days. So that's just a few. We think there's probably a lot more, but we, like most, we're not big in making these big investments in something that has a short shelf life. So we've been really encouraged and excited by some schools, those that we work directly with and those that we don't, that are sort of taking the tenets of this idea and using it to address some of these historical barriers. Again, there's obviously compliance and financial implications, but I think the sort of theory and the thesis behind the work rings true, even if there's some nuance within those two components. And then again, I know we don't have all authorizers in the room, but we've had some conversation with authorizers about how this can be used, again, specifically around underserved, underrepresented, marginalized communities, how authorizers can kind of use this model to thought partner with their schools and go beyond just the accountability lens. And then big picture, how exposure to things like this for schools or networks is really important, and it doesn't always have to correspond to like a requirement or a mandate. So that's always my 2 cents, because we live on both sides of the table. We work with a lot of schools and with a lot of authorizers, and we know that sometimes we need to be careful and balance how those two entities work with each other and stay within their respective lanes. So, but that's it. I know I only had a couple minutes. I try to get it all in. I'll again pause and see if there's questions, comments, thoughts about sort of what we were able to do around an acute need and how we're thinking broader about serving more students, breaking down historical barriers, and ultimately trying to break down some of these ideas around the constraints of time and space and calendars that have impacted kids for far too long.
That was perfect. Thank you, Mark. So we'll open up any questions while we have Mark on the line. Go ahead.
I felt like our most acute need during last year's pandemic were our first and second graders being online. And I wonder if it seemed like this was targeted more at the older kids. Is that correct? Or is this a project that is thinking about those youngest kids?
Mark, you are muted.
First time doing a Zoom. No, I'm kidding. This is for a K-8 district, and so in K-8 district in Ohio, so right now very few of their students are eligible for a vaccine. That being said, there have been more students quarantined in K3 than the other grades. So it's being operationalized in the same exact way for kindergarteners, first graders, second graders. I think, all those students have a shared experience of doing fully online school when the schools in Ohio were all closed. So there is a little bit of a foundation to build on. But then when we think about the content, for kindergarteners, for first graders, and for second graders, the work, which is still scope and sequence aligned, is more around foundational skill than standards specific. That is partially a part of how the scope and sequence of this charter network is framed. But I think big picture, we probably would have been advocating for that anyway. Like, let's just do 10 solid days focused around the, phonics, phonemic awareness aspect of like what the student would have been working on versus like a specific Ohio standard. But to answer your question, all grades as young as kindergarten, with actually a higher percentage of K-3 being on quarantine and thus using this than in the upper elementary and middle school grades.
Perfect. Any other questions? All right. Well, if you'd like to connect with Mark, his information's here. Otherwise, thank you, Mark, for your time and for sharing about some of your innovative practices today.
Sure. Thanks. I appreciate it.
All right. We'll see you later.
Bye.
All right. Well, luckily for you, your last 3 presenters are all in person today. So that's great. We will keep the Zoom room up and going just as that's doing our recording for us today. But next we have John and Avalon, who are here to talk about SPED records. One of our colleagues for William and I. His name is Greg, and he is our investigator and remediation specialist. And as he's been working with some of the cases that he's looking into, he thought just a good refresher on SPED records might be really beneficial for our group. So we invited John and Avalon to come and just give us a quick crash course on SPED records and then answer any questions you might have. So without further ado, take it away, John and Avalon. All the ado, yes.
Thank you for inviting us, Marie. I don't know if, do I have access to manipulate this real quick or
You
just to
can.
do?
What do you want to do?
Just go to a website.
Okay.
I guess maybe I could share it. But hi, I'm John. I am the records manager / student data privacy trainer here at USBE. And this is?
I'm Avalon Snell. I am the Records and Information Management Specialist for Education at the State Archives. So when you call archives and you have a records question or a storage question, you're going to get me. So if you ever have any records questions, I can get you my contact information. I'm sorry I didn't bring business cards with me. I thought this was going to be online. So
yeah,
I
so
got
did I.
on here really quickly. But I'm happy to connect with you. Yes. Yes, it's just my name. It's Avalon Snell. So AVALONSNELL at utah.gov. So if you ever have any education records questions, please feel free to contact me and I can help you out.
Odds are I'll probably, if you contact me, I'll end up contacting her.
Yes.
But I can point you to a resource that will hopefully allow you to fish for yourself and not
Yes.
necessarily need to contact us. You can see here on our website at the USBE schools.utah.gov. Yeah, I don't even think they've got them over there.
Okay.
So student data privacy is the section that this is under. And then if you scroll, you can see educational records. It's kind of, it's so right up at the front. It's buried. Okay. I'm not gonna lie, it's buried, but it's here. And if you can see, all of these are the different legislative and board rules that apply to records. What we have here is this document, which we have put together. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with what the records on the legislative website used to be, but you used to, well, and it still is, but you can go and search for a keyword and it will bring up all of the records for the entire state complex, whether it's, the judiciary or the water or utilities or all sorts of other things. So what we did is we went through all of those records and pulled out all of the education specific ones and put them into this document right here, which is called the Utah RAMP, which stands for Records Appraisal and Management Program. And everything in here are all of the records that are applicable to education. As you can see, we've split this up into 5 sections. It's not 5 seconds, it's 51 pages, believe me. But section 1 is administrative records, anything that you would need under that administrative, and you can see some of those subheadings. Section 2 are all of your asset management records. That'll be under there. And keep in mind, and Avalon can probably reinforce this, but these are kind of like bigger umbrella boxes that you can, there's not going to be anything that fits exactly your thing the way that it exists. These are just big kind of tubs. We have financial management, which is section 3. Child nutrition is located under financial management. Section 4 is all the HR management. Section 5 is what we would traditionally think of as educational records. It is its own subsection, which is just the ones pertaining to students. You'd think that when we talk about educational records, it applies to just the students, but as you can see here, it applies to many, many, many more things. And what we are here for specifically are these special education program or student health behavior things. And the other thing that I wanted to point you to as far as resources go before we go to some of the more specifics as far as special ed, if we're back on this page, you can see that we also have this quick disposition guide, which I'll show you. I don't know if you know, but that's Avalon animated right there. So you can go and you can print this out and stick it next to the desks of everybody that deals with the records. So it's this quick disposition guide, because in education, we tend to be hoarders because one day we might need it.
It's okay. Historians are the same way.
We don't necessarily.
Even though we write this. Do as we say, not as we do.
We don't necessarily need all of the stuff. And especially for charter schools, what we find is that one of the budget lines that you don't necessarily account for are records, storage of the records, management of the records. Those are things that you just don't account for. The space that you actually are using in that back room. And we can talk about how to handle that in just a second. And then the last thing that I wanted to point you to that is on our page right here is this appointed records officer certification. Now, I created this course in conjunction with Avalon. She is our guide, but we were just looking at all of the appointed records officer list in the state. Each LEA is to have one appointed records officer. Of all 156 agencies in the state, we have about 80% that have a current records officer. Of the 20% that are expired or not current, I would say 80% or a majority of those are charter schools. So if you want to take a look and make sure that your appointed records officer is certified, this is where they can go instead of going down to the archives building and participating in an 8-hour. Have any of you ever done that? Some of you?
Yeah, it's awful. And we helped write it and we know it's awful. So take this one instead.
So we created this, it's on a Canvas course. It takes about 45 minutes. I suggest not only you, but the appointed records officer and or that front desk person that handles these things, because you want them to be knowledgeable of these, but it's a really quick little course. They sign in, they can get, it counts as the test is at the end. And then I'm going to do this just for fun. If you're on, I don't know if there's even any sound, but as you can see, there's these animated videos led by. You can get her autograph. She's here for a short time. So those are the tools that are available to you to fish for yourself in regards to records and record management. Like I said, all these are on the USBE page under student data privacy. And then I'll show you exactly where you can find this. It's this link right here, this education records, appraisal and management. That's where you can find everything in regards to that. Does anybody have any specific questions in regards to educational records or?
I know that was a super fast presentation.
Special ed. What was that?
You've done it. Good.
Thank you.
Yes, it does count as your annual certification. According to the grandma law, you do have to have at least one. You can have multiple, but at least one. Yes. Were you raising your hand or no? Okay.
Special education records, record retention. I can explain to you how this guidebook works if you're not familiar with it, but essentially what you can do is what we have here is 5.2.2 special education records, which links to the actual state record, the GRS 1476. The retention is 3 years after separation or 5 years after separation or retain after 5 seats.
Yeah, so what it is if they hit 22, then it is the 3 years after they hit 22. If they're younger than 22, but they've already left, then you would keep it the 5 years. So it depends on the age of the child.
So would 25 kind of be this imaginary line in the sand?
So basically it's, 25, 26. So we try to follow FERPA or like, you know, how the Affordable Care Act made it so like what your child can stay on your insurance till they're 26 now. We kind of try to follow those same kind of rules.
Okay.
So that the same kind of thing would apply. So if they stay education wise in your program till they're 22, try to keep the record until you think they would be about 25, 26. If they leave, when they're 18, try to keep it for that same amount until they're 25 or 26. Does that make sense?
And then we would just destroy them. What do we do with records that we want to hang on to, but maybe we're a small charter school and don't have the space?
So we offer free storage at a warehouse in Clearfield. If you want to use it, you're welcome to, since you're a charter school. If you're interested, contact me. I would help you set up what we call a series. So it's basically a tracking number that I give you. So if you want to send all of your invoices to the warehouse, you'd contact me. I'd get you a series number, a tracking number for your invoices. we'd get you some boxes, and then you could just send it to storage.
But what happens if I need it?
You can just send it, we can send it back to you. We can scan it.
This is the part that we
we
haven't taken the show on the road yet. We're getting close.
I
though.
know.
This is actually the first time
So-
we've met. We worked together for a year and a half
Yes, this is the first time in person. that
in
we've met.
person.
So we have something called Scan on Demand. You can email us or fill out the form. We'll go pull it down from our shelves. We'll scan you an encrypted copy of it, usually within 24 hours. If you actually want the file back, we'll mail it back to you, and you can either send it back if you want, or you can keep it. But it's totally free. The storage service is free, the scanning service, the mailing service.
What happens if you have a
All free.
record that comes to term and it's stored? Will you guys,
We'll destroy it for you for free. Or if it's historical, they will send it to the archives for preservation for free. 100% free. So
so you
if you guys
shouldn't
are
be
running out of
storing
storage space,
site.
let me know. I can help you with that.
Yes, please use Avalon as a resource for all things. And again, our hope is to create resources for you to kind of do a lot of this before you have the questions. But if you do have the questions, which we always see are nuanced, please don't hesitate to get a hold of us.
And also, I don't know if any of you have ever had a grandma request, but I can also help you. I can't help you fulfill your grandma request, but if you have questions on how the process works, or how the classifications work, let me know. I can help you with grandma stuff as well.
So on our course, if you can see here, let's begin, et cetera, it's got Avalon's picture and her contact information there at the bottom, but you can also just probably Google Avalon State Archives, Utah.
Yeah,
and it will probably
I will
bring
pop
her
up.
as
So,
well. Cool. Okay, you get to see.
so
I recognize some faces in here.
yes,
So the records officer certification is good for how long?
1 year.
Just 1 year, they have to retake that course every year.
And
but it's the same test. So,
It seems like it comes up faster than.
yeah.
if you get an email from me that says, take your course,
Yes.
it's kind of, it's not personal. Cool. Thanks.
Anything
Sorry for
else?
disrupting your desktop.
That was great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
And if
you.
anybody has any questions in regards to student data privacy agreements,
Thank you.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. William, it's up to you now.
It's up to me. Okay. I'm going to be really quick. I am just going to talk about the OFMA campaign, a little bit about what the campaign means, what you can expect, and how we're going to move forward. So in September, every LEA would send out a list of kind of updates of all of the stuff that legislation required for OFMA. We found that as we've been looking at all of the schools' websites, there were a lot of schools that were still following old guidelines or just really out of compliance. Rather than going through one by one and saying, okay, we're going to work with you to get this compliant, we're going to work with you, we're going to work with you, we're just like, we're going to get it all done at once. We realize that this is actually going to make it a lot more efficient in a lot of ways. And so we send out the requirements. Everybody's been working on it. You have until the 19th of this month to get it done. At that point, we're really just going to say, if you're not ready, if you're not good at this point, we're now going to issue a notice of concern. Because we've been working with you for a couple months. So please get it done. If you would like to reach out to your portfolio manager or myself or Smriti or Stuart or anybody else before that deadline and say, hey, will you look at this with me? We're happy to. I've got 3 meetings tomorrow actually that are just going through somebody's website to make sure that we're kind of up to speed already. So if you have that, reach out to us now. Let's get it compliant. We're calling this a campaign. The reason we're doing this is because we're trying to be a little bit more proactive and a little bit more supportive in the way that we're doing some of our oversight. What we would like to do and as we're going forward, we're actually also going to be doing one with the UAPCS in the next couple of months on required policies. As legislation has changed, there's a lot of policies that you're required to have for your governing board, for your schools. So we want to work with you. So I'm going to give you an opportunity right now to reach out to me if you're interested. do this by email. So my email is william.evans@schools.utah.gov. If you would like to participate with us, what we're going to do is over the next 2 months, we're going to get together with some of the directors and as many staff as we can get. The UAPCS is participating, and we're going to just figure out exactly what it is are your required policies that you need to have in place. We're also going to talk about what are the best ones you should probably also have, like above and beyond. That way, then come February, I think, we're going to then send this out to all of the schools and say, here's our best thinking. The charter community has come together. Here's our best thinking on what is required, on what we think are best practices. And then we're going to give you another couple months to kind of get all of your policies in place, do your own audit, figure things out, and then we'll come back and do another review. Jennifer.
Just to kind of sell this a little more, we've already done much of the work in gathering up what those required policies are. So it's not like you're going to have to come here and come up with all the policies, but we want to make sure that we're running it by you of the policies that we've identified that you don't know of. Hey, wait, there's this other policy that I know of that you have forgotten about. There's a lot of them. And it's been eye-opening to us as we've gone through this of just how many policies you're required to do. And we've been talking about how we can maybe publicize and get the word out that this is just, all the policies that schools have to do. But it isn't like you're having to start from scratch if you volunteer for this. So it's not an overwhelming amount of work that you volunteer.
Thank you. Very clear. Yeah, we really just want your good thinking. Many hands make light work. So yes.
Can you add how often they need to be reviewed?
Explain what you mean by that, like the policies.
Yes, like some things have to be reviewed annually, or some things just have to be reviewed regularly, and what does that mean? And like, how often should our boards be looking at a policy? Are there policies that have to be reviewed every single year?
Great idea. So yes, we can look into this and figure this out as well as part of this. And we'd love your insight too. So if you want to join us virtually and we can think about this. I will say, we had one school reach out. They had their board secretary reach out to me, and she sent us an email or a spreadsheet, and she's like, here's all the policies that I've found in law that we're required to do, and here's the ones that are out of date, here's the old ones, here's the requirements. And it was like 400 lines. It was great. It was so good. Like, she's already put in a lot of work. It was really nice to see that. But it was also a really good indication that there's not a lot of clarity around some of these. So we do need to get, the more we can kind of all come together and come to a consensus, the better off we're going to be.
So on the rubric, it said either the transparency site or our website for some of the information. Are you looking at both of those, or are you just going to our website to see whether it's on our website?
We are going to be going to both of those. I will say you're welcome to use your website. Like that's one of the things that's in code. The reason the Utah Public Notices website is easier is just because it automatically tracks a lot of information for you. So like the law said, or the statute says that your pending minutes have to be available within 3 days. The Utah Public Notices website will keep track of 3 days after the meeting, they'll give the timestamp of when you uploaded stuff. So it does a lot of that for you. If you're doing it on your own website, you've got to come up with how you're going to keep track of that yourself.
So I don't know whether, I'm sure everyone has this problem, but it drives me nuts. Every time I call the state office about a question or something that's new, the first question is write a policy around it. And for those of us in the room who are writing the policies, that just becomes somewhat untenable, never mind keeping up with what ones we're supposed to have. But it seems like this building thinks that a policy solves everything. And our board right now wants to do 3 readings per policy. That's a lot of our board meeting getting through the policies. I mean, we're doing 2 and 3 every month as it is. So
there's a lot. That's what we kind of want to come together and make this as easy a process as we possibly can. Any other questions? If not, I will turn the time back over to Marie. Remember, November 19th, that's your deadline. Reach out to me beforehand if you'd like some help, and we can schedule that.
All right. We're now at our favorite part, which is our training for the month. And this was promised to be an extra special training with Vice Chair Bowles. So we will turn the time to him, and he's going to be talking about feedback for impact. So.
Thank you all for hanging on until the very end. So I understand you just can't, you're melting away and that's all you can do, that you had to escape. I get that. So policies, what a fun thing to do, follow policies. We have all a love-hate relationship with policies, right? You need them, but it sometimes is a real pain, but you have them because they make you defensible. It's all the things on those lists of laws we have to keep track of, but like every school should have a sign by law that says "In God We Trust" in it. And so, are we all, does someone is the sheriff of all of that? So anyway, all the things that go on. As much as I can create PowerPoints with the best of both sides, decided not to make a PowerPoint for today. I thought much better if we just talk. I hope you'll talk and share and discuss like you did with the truancy discussion and subs. Now I'll add a little bit to subs. That was my doctoral dissertation, was about substitutes. So I'll share a couple of things from that as well. And if we talk for a few minutes, I know that coming down to this room here in my mind, I used to substitute all the time too. I'd say to teachers, you get a day off. It's my way to be in the classroom because I miss teaching and being with kids. So I'd say you get a free day off and I'll teach your class and you don't have to do lesson plans because that's not a free day off. If you have to write the lesson plans, that's more work than it's worth. I know the curriculum at each of the levels, I'll do it. And luckily never a calculus teacher drew my name because I would have been in real trouble. But I led a high school choir all day. And that was, my arms had never been so tired by the finish of that day. But one time I taught a third grade class, and you remember in third grade science that you look at the phases of the moon. So I thought, you need to see light and dark. So I'll make transparencies and take them in there to do that. And I did. And of course, what did I forgot? We have no more overhead projectors. Schools just don't have them anymore. They found one in an old closet somewhere. So luckily I could use that. And I was thinking about, I hadn't been in this room for a while. Some of you may be as old as I am and remember this room used to be the curriculum room, and it had lots of shelves and all of the books that the curriculum materials that we were allowed to use. Yeah. And now it's now in there. So we had all those shelves, so you could come and go through all of them and look at them. But I was thinking, oh, we'll have whiteboards. We won't. Well, we'll discuss. And at one place, I may ask Marie and or William if he's back. They're just 5 words. I may have them put up on a blank PowerPoint screen or a Word doc or something so that we can share it and look at it. So I'm going to back up quite a ways and say, what business are we in? And let me tell you, I think we are a business. I'm going to tell you, I think we are a business, and I'm partly indoctrinated with that. I spent a long time with Linda Darling Hammond at Stanford University, and we worked with the School of Business and School of Education. When I finished that program, I was really convinced we are a business. So we're not mining and manufacturing, we're not retail, we are the business of education, but what is our business about?
Define the client first.
Define the client. Yeah, I love that. And how do you define the client? Who do you think the client is? I've struggled to that a lot in my career too. Who do you think the client is?
Well, I think coming off COVID, the client is parent.
I'm with you. That's kind of where my conclusion has come to as well. Because parents can vote with their feet, right? They can take kids wherever they want to. And we have choices and options, and we should have choices and options. We all believe in that for parents, right? And so that they have that opportunity to make choices. All right, so define the client. What are the things in our business? What else are we about? We serve parents. I mean, we work for parents. What is our job? What are we doing?
Educating children.
Educating children, helping children, teaching, helping children to learn. Will you buy that instead? Because I always think it's not what we teach children learn that matters, right? It's not that we've taught how to add mixed fractions. That's not our job. Our job is to make sure children have learned how to admins fractions, right? And that's a different thing. It's not just what we teach, but what children learn. That matters, and we keep teaching it until they learn it. All right, so learning, we're about student learning. And some of you have hands up, we're gonna add something else to that. Did you want to modify? Yeah, go ahead.
We play like a really important cultural role in our country.
Yeah.
Preparing kids to be citizens, to be thoughtful, to be civil, to be members of a democracy, right? To be able to think and reason and write and speak, understand how it works at a basic level so that they can participate.
Oh, I so love that. And I'm so glad you said that, because sometimes it's really the unwritten curriculum that is more important than some of the things that are listed in standards, right? Well, how do we know to raise our hand to speak? Well, we learn that in school. And you go to a community meeting and someone asks a question, our hands go up. Well, we learned that in school. How do you know how to queue up for things? Well, we learned it waiting in line at the drinking fountain, right? There are all those kinds of things, and how to have discourse with a big group and how to interact. Yeah, we did. That's exactly. Thank you for adding that. All right. If all those things, that learning, oh, sorry, because I'm not on the screen. Huh.
Yeah, we just want to capture you.
Yeah, oh, okay, thanks. All right. Not that I fill the screen all the way across, but so here we go. So if those are the things that we are about, those are the things we are about, how do we measure our success? How do we know when we're successful then? If that's what we're about, those are our goals, those are the things we want. And I know it's a lot more specifics than that, but how do you measure your success? How do you know when you're successful? Yeah.
I feel like as a charter especially, I'm successful when the community has a consistent message when I ask them who I am and what I'm.
Awesome. So you're successful. They understand your mission, your vision, your goals, and where you're planning to go as a school, and they can tell you that back, speak back to you. I would count that as a success. Yeah. What else? If we're helping children to learn, how do we know they're successful?
I think it depends on from what perspective you are looking. Like if you're thinking of a student, how much we are impacting on that particular student, I think is the success for that student. But are we thinking more institutional, kind of like for all the students, or for kind of the institutional level, what kind of goals or missions or somehow the things that we are trying to achieve? I think it depends like at what level or what kind of perspective we are looking. It depends the success, you can define that way, because there are expectations, standards, like there are kind of community expectations, society expectations, state expectations, official expectations. It depends on from where you're looking at, like what will define success, depending on that.
Yeah. You just made me tired. We have a big job. All of those levels, right, that we have to be concerned about. Institutional level, what the community is looking for, and then helping each individual student towards some goals that we have in mind for that child, moving the child from where he or she is to where we want them to be in their learning progress, right? Okay, so we have all those goals. Now I'm going to come to this. Everyone is always looking for the silver bullet. How do we accomplish that? How are we going to get to those goals? I'm going to measure my success. I want to always say, I've made it, I'm a success. Everyone knows it. They're able to talk that with me. They know their children are learning. The parents are voting with their feet. They want to be here. I have a waiting list because others want to be here because they also are voting with their feet, wanting to be in that school. So I'm measuring that success. What is the silver bullet? What is the key to great learning in any school? What's the key? Absolutely, thanks. Yeah, you're coming to that. There are those who say it's a software program, it's something else, but never is. It's a great teacher in every classroom. Do you all believe that? If you had an okay facility, pretty good materials, and a great teacher, you're going to have great learning. You're going to have the greatest software, all the technology, beautiful building, all the materials that you want, and a crummy teacher, and guess what? Learning will be crummy. Learning will be crummy. It is all comes down to having a great teacher in every classroom. Anyone who disagrees, you can push back if you want, push back at me. Now, hopefully we have all of those resources and a great teacher. That's the most ideal, but it's a great teacher in every classroom that really is the silver bullet, is the key. And it's just has always been, from Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle to today, prior to them as well. It's always been a great teacher who does that. So how do we, who has to make sure that there's a great teacher in every classroom? Yeah, you do. You do. And I'm going to tell you, so if having a great teacher in every classroom is the most important thing for achieving success, the most important thing, then that has to be your most important task. That has to be your most important task. And yet, do we always give really strong feedback? Now, I can point a finger at myself as well. And as a leader of the school, did I always do that? What prevents us from doing that? Putting out fires. Yeah. Yeah, you know, when you walk in the day, you have really great intent, these are going to happen, and boom, 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 all this other stuff takes place, right? Yeah. So what else? Other things that prevent us from doing it? Yeah.
Resources, having the candidates apply to our schools that are going to become great teachers with our to-do list.
Yeah, well said. Well said. So part of having a great teacher is not just giving feedback and growing great teachers, it's also hiring great teachers too, right? You're always in the process of building a dream team. You always want to use your higher power to build a dream team. That's what we're about. We're there to build dream teams. And if someone's not the dream team and I don't see that happening with that person, now's my time to not have that person as part of that team. I'm building a dream team and I'm always looking, always recruiting, always watching, trying to find those folks who I can court to come into my school, that I want to be there to build that dream team. And sometimes I have teachers who just are not at that level. And you always ask the question, has this person ever been a great teacher? And the answer to that question tells you what? Yeah, tells you what to do next. Is this a will or a skill concern? Is they have no will to do it? Maybe this person has been a great teacher in the past, but has just lost the enthusiasm and the desire to do it. That's a will problem. And maybe this person has never been a great teacher. They just don't yet know how or have the skills. But then you say, this is a skill problem, will or skill, this is a skill problem. And can I help this individual gain those skills to help him or her? Wouldn't that be great? If you can do that in each case, you don't have to go out looking more. You can build those that you want to be really tremendous in your school. Some really good research. I'm going to read just a quotation or two. The best ways to improve a school are to hire better teachers or make the ones you have better. Great principals, great leaders, great school directors, great school leaders do both. Yet, I'm going to tell you that we are still reticent to give really good feedback. This is some research in the last 5 years. Data show that evaluators perceive 19% of teachers as below proficient. This is national data, so maybe not anyone in this room, but 19% of teachers are below proficient, but they rated only about 6% of teachers that way on the assessment. Why? Yeah.
I think we get worried about wanting to be liked or our perception in their minds and forgetting that when push comes to shove, they want to be a good employee and it's up to us to tell them.
That's right. So it's hard on us to do that, right? It's not a pleasant thing to do always as you're doing that, because you may feel that pushback from them too. And it sometimes is really difficult. We also are all educators and we are kind of nurturers. We went into education because we think I can fix this, I can solve this for everybody, I can make everyone better. And it really takes hard work to really make that. And you just have to say, all right, I've got to go through that difficult, hard time to do it. You had a hand.
Yeah, I think two things. One is that idea, especially in charter schools, I think we think of ourselves as sort of a community of people, right? It feels sometimes like a family, and it's hard to tell a family member that they're no longer part of that group, right? So we work with them, and we support, and we suffer some things that maybe we shouldn't suffer because of that. And then it's connected to the hiring thing. If you've got a teacher who's mediocre or less than mediocre, but the prospects of
finding someone
might
better,
replace them is a big question mark. And I think there's more of a willingness to say, let's struggle through one more year with this person.
Yeah, well said, well said. And can you do that? Can you, as you think about, maybe I have to, but I'm gonna have to work to make sure this person increases and becomes better. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, one thought that I had was how it ties back to the actual evaluation tool. Sometimes that data that you get from that evaluation tool doesn't really provide the appropriate feedback for that teacher.
Yeah, I
kind of that
so
precision versus accuracy argument. So
maybe
precisely providing feedback, but is it accurately giving you the results that you want? And that's sometimes can be a difficult challenge with charters.
Yeah, I so agree with you. So agree. And there's so many little things. Teachers sometimes say, what do you really want? What do you want? So we don't make teachers better, we make teachers bitter. We make them upset. They're not sure what to expect. They become bitter and upset, and it disrupts that family in our school. And we can't make them better because sometimes an evaluation instrument is very difficult. I'm going to tell you that, and there are those who would argue also that a school director, a principal, can never be the evaluator. Or you can never coach teachers or give feedback if you're the one ultimately giving the evaluation, right? And I'm going to tell you that's a bunch of baloney from my perspective. Always when I'm speaking, it's from my perspective. So you'll hear me say that a lot, that my educator mind does even, when I see the boxes for lunch, my mind always goes to, how can I use those in my classroom? I can store things in those. Could they be kids' pencil boxes? I'm already, we scavenger, right? We make things out of stuff. I start to think of that immediately. All right, so now I took myself off task. So I gotta get back to where I was. So how can we give great feedback and still be the one who gives that summative evaluation? Thank you for nodding. I hope others of you are agreeing.
Absolutely. It's how you say it.
Yeah. So talk about that.
Well, I just think, so many people are afraid of having those really hard conversations. I think you can have those hard conversations, just don't have them as a hard person.
Yeah.
So you go in and you find, and it's different for every single teacher you speak with.
Yeah.
How am I going to speak to you so that you can hear me? If
Yeah.
I want you to grow and change, I have to make sure you hear me.
That's
and if
right.
I'm a harsh critic, you're not going to hear me,
That's right.
right?
That's right. So a harsh critic means I'm attacking the person as opposed to the behaviors. Would you buy that? Yeah, I'm talking about how to improve behaviors, things that I'm doing, not me as a person. So you never have to attack the individual, but you're working on improving the behaviors.
And I also think we don't share feedback enough.
Yeah.
So when students come into our office and tell us what's happening in class, or a parent sends an email, or a parent gives a call, how many of us immediately go back to that teacher and say, hey, I need you to know what the feedback I'm getting, whether it's positive or negative.
Right.
I feel that there's a lot of teachers who never get that feedback.
I'm so with you.
Really important.
And appreciate it. Honestly, most teachers really want to hear that. They want to know what I can do. None of us entered the profession to say, I want to be the worst teacher these kids have ever had. I want them to think of my name in fear the rest of their lives. We want them to say, when they see us, I would say, when you see me when I'm old, and now I used to say that years ago, now I have to say now that I'm old, but when you see me walking across the street with my cane, I hope that you'll help me across the street instead of kicking my cane out from underneath me, right? I wanted that. I always wanted to succeed and kind of build that. We want to. So teachers want to know that. They want that feedback, but how we give it is the key. Are we building a wall? Well, they're just saying that. Yeah, I guess you're just not succeeding, or this is what I'm hearing. What could we do to correct it? Then you build a bridge. Either you're building a wall or you're building a bridge, helping them to grow to something better, or you building a wall, which only makes teachers more frustrated and bitter. So I'm going to come back to what others did. Were there other comments? I didn't want to pass them. Yeah.
Building relationship and trust also plays a lot.
Yeah.
Because once they have that trust level in you, whatever comes from you become valuable, because
Yeah.
then has impact on them, I think.
Well said, well said. Stephen Covey would talk about making deposits into the individual's emotional bank account, right? If you're always making deposits, meaning you're building your relationship, when you may have to make a withdrawal at a place, you're not going into the red. You're not becoming bankrupt with that individual. You still have trust levels. They know you mean the best for them. Yeah, go ahead. Keep at it.
Oh, I'm open to accepting that it's a skill.
Yeah.
That you can teach, the teaching skill to an individual.
Yeah.
But I also am concerned that there is a personality element to how people solve problems or how they approach a situation in the classroom that is very, very deeply personal, and sometimes is the reason why they cannot be a teacher.
Yeah.
And I struggle with that because I feel like, we need to do a better job of teaching these skills and identifying what the skill, like what's lacking in the skill set sort of goes deep into sometimes into personality.
Yeah, I agree with that, but but then you also have to be able to discern the difference between, is this a skill problem, a will problem, or is this one's just not going to make it? This is not one I can coach beyond that just because they're not who they are. I would say hire for attitude, train for skill. Hire for attitude, train for skill. Hire for attitude, train for skill. Making sure you've got someone with that deep level, but then train those skills on top if they don't quite have that yet, because they will work with you to do it. Hire for attitude, train for skill. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say what a little bit about what you're sharing as far as what's happening in my school right now. I have a teacher, very kind person. So I've known her for years in a different role in the building. I thought when she approached me about coming back into the classroom, I needed a teacher, and I was like, wow, this is fantastic, right? Yeah, this would be great. You're such a fabulous person. Now, 3 months into school, I'm like, who the hell is this person? I don't know this person. So what she's explaining, when I've been observing, is so different than what I expected to see from her. So the reason I share this is because I've approached it by saying, I've been reading a lot of different things, but there's got to be something in her personality or something in her life that's sort of pushing her one direction, which is the exact opposite of what I thought she would be doing. Specifically we have a student in that class who speaks zero English. She speaks Spanish fluently. She's a second language learner, learned Spanish, that's her second language. And so because learning Spanish to her was an immersion, like you're gonna just have to learn it. She's trying to treat him the same way.
Yeah.
And I'm like the exact opposite. I'm like, are you kidding? You have the skill and the ability to teach him in such a loving way that he can learn, but instead she's being very cold.
Yeah.
So I had to go back to the statement of saying, okay. And so many times I approach her with, I realize that this is based on my perception or how I see it. So I'd like to see this. So I've now got her talking about, oh, well, I see it like this. Okay, but let's think about how this child sees. So we've changed the conversation, but it took me kind of going, how am I going to do this? Because this person is awesome, but what is she doing?
Yeah.
So not what I thought she was doing.
Yeah.
But it really had to come down to, you've had some experiences, you're putting that experience into this, and that's not, I don't want you to do that basically.
Right. But the good thing is you didn't run away from it. You had that hard conversation with her, right?
Yeah.
And
it doesn't need to be a hard conversation.
Yeah.
I think if you're coming from a statement of, you know what, we need to figure out what's best for the child. So here's what I see. What do you see?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't see that. Oh, well, let's talk about that. You know, sometimes it doesn't need to be as difficult as we think it's going to be.
Exactly.
It's just getting going.
Yeah. But you were building bridges. You didn't build a wall. You said, here's a way to look at it too. Let's try these things. Try to implement that. Let me watch it and see how that goes, right? Yeah, it's knowing who we are. That's an Aaron Tippin lyric from his song, right? You say you have to stand for something or you'll fall for anything. What do you stand for? You have to stand for something, you'll fall for anything. What do you stand for? What do you believe? Such as in Spanish, I'll also use the theme really from Don Quixote de la Mancha. It says, yo sé quién soy. Yo sé quién soy. I know who I am. I know who I am. I know what I believe. He knew who he was. So you have to, and then you have to face it. So the acronym of FEAR, right? You either forget everything and run. You won't talk to teachers about concerns, or you face everything and rise and help everyone to grow and help them all to come to better learning. So what do you look for when you're going into a classroom? Let me finish with one sentence first. I'm going to just close up that notion of, can you be a supervisor who evaluates? I'm going to tell you, you never have to evaluate if you're always giving feedback. You never have to evaluate if you're always giving good feedback. And what I mean by that is, if you're in the classroom frequently, all the time in the classroom, then when it comes time to complete that evaluation or that evaluative tool, there's no surprise. It's just filling it out. It's no surprise for you or the individual or the teacher. It's not a surprise because the two of you have been working on improved practice all school year. And teachers will be very comfortable with you coming into the classroom if you're there all the time. It's when you only come in periodically that upsetting to teachers. Right? You agree? Those of us have all been in classrooms and had an administrator walk in, you think, what does he want? What does that person want? What's wrong? But if they're there all the time, participating, just part of it, building the relationships, building the trust, always there and giving feedback, I'm used to it. It's the way we do business. It's our culture in our school. That's just what we do. All right. So with that, what do you look for when you go into classrooms? What are you looking for? What do you say it again? Engagement, student engagement. Excellent. That the Cognos, who accredits our secondary schools, at least in the state, that they say that's the only important thing on their their evaluation tool is, are students engaged? That's what they look for. You don't look at the teacher, you only look at the students. Are students engaged? What else? What else you look for? Engagement, what else? Who's doing all the talking? Like me right now, right? So, yeah. So who's doing all the talking, and can our students being engaged because they're participating too? Who else? Tell me some more things. What do you look for? Yeah.
What's being taught in the classroom aligns with some kind of objective or some kind of a direction.
Yeah.
Identifiable to students.
Yeah, right. So this is something that these students need in this course or at this grade level. This is what students need, right? And it's not that I'm teaching dinosaurs every single year, because everybody wants to teach the dinosaur part because kids love that. So I can't teach dinosaurs every year. I have to teach what is for this course. And if I'm teaching biology, it better be about biology. I'm not teaching about the laws of physics, right? Well, they may enter in. I kind of paused on that. Wasn't a good example. I have to think of another one. But yeah.
I think you're also looking for classroom culture. How do the students talk to each other? How does the teacher talk to the students and vice versa?
Yeah. So it's the environment in the classroom as well, right? Is this a place where kids feel comfortable to speak? Can they speak? And are they going to feel comfortable doing that? What else? What else you look for? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm noticing transitions. It's part of that culture.
Yeah.
So what procedures has the teacher put in place as we transition from active teaching to now we're doing discussion. So I'm looking for seamless transitions, and that's part of the culture, because the teachers already set rules in a loving way, and students are treating each other like the teacher treats them.
Yeah.
So that's a good indicator.
Yeah.
And then they're moving quickly from one lesson portion of the lesson to another within seconds.
Yeah.
Within 3 seconds. I'm looking for that.
Well said, well said. I love that, and thank you for saying procedures, which is an important piece. The transitions are procedures. Whenever I say to teachers, you need to be teaching procedures, some say, I don't have time to do that. I think you don't have time not to do that. The amount of hours you can save by the end of the school year by having tight transitions, for example, or kids knowing what to do when they're passing in papers, or how to distribute papers, or any of those procedures. What do I do if my pencil lead breaks? Do I have a procedure for taking care of that? You don't have time not to teach those procedures. Teachers need to make sure and practice them. Practice them. It's time to line up at the door, but you don't do it until I tell you it's time. Instruction is going on until that, because we work bell to bell. So what are the procedures for doing that? How to get to that place?
Really, those should be taught before content. Yeah. Because then they don't interrupt the content.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, well said, well said. Thank you for bringing up procedures. One of my favorite things. I just love that. So good procedures. Yeah. Anything else anybody wants to share?
Differentiation.
Okay, excellent. Talk a little bit about that.
I want to know what level they're teaching to, and then I want to know where we're good at. Are we hitting the low, or are we hitting the high? Are we teaching to the middle, or are we ignoring the middle?
Yeah. So we're making sure that we're teaching it to all needs of each individual student. That's why I say I don't even like the notion of, you say we believe all children should learn. I would say I believe each child can learn. And that's even better.
I don't even think it's, are we doing it to all levels? Is I have to know which level my individual teachers are teaching to, what they're good at and what they need help with. So I could go into the biology teacher who's doing a great job at the high end, but my science teacher or the other physics teacher may be doing a good job on the low. I need to know those individual teacher strengths to be able to pair that to the rest of our school.
Yeah, I buy that. But can you, within a teacher who's teaching at the high end, a biology teacher, shouldn't that high end teacher also know how to help kids who are struggling as well on the other end, if there are students in that individual classroom too?
Yeah, that's my job to get them there.
Yeah. But that's what you're looking for, right? Yeah, exactly right. We're saying the same thing. That's exactly right. That's what you're looking for. How can I help you to make sure that that happens, right? How can I make sure that that happens in that classroom? Because a teacher has to be able to reach all levels, has to be able to teach that. And that's one of the tricks of the artistry of great teaching, is that you can do that. I know when I substitute, one of those times I substitute was a 6th grade class. I think on purpose I did, because it was a huge class. And I taught a lesson on how to determine the area of a cylinder. And I thought I just did such a great job. And I used poker chips and, to stack them up. And we were talking the area of a circle and stacked up poker chips and gave them some problems to practice. You know this, you've heard it. Just a few minutes after I gave them the things to practice, one student said to me, "I'm done." And another one said to me, "Now, what is it you wanted us to do?" Almost simultaneously, because we had this wide spectrum. The nice thing is the next day I was at the legislature and I could talk to legislators about, this is what really happens in our classrooms. This is the reality of what happens, and could give that example. So we're looking for that. All right, teachers, if that's what you're looking for, do your teachers know that's what you're looking for? And you can just answer that to yourself. Do they know? And teachers need to know. I'll go back to that evaluation instrument. Evaluation instruments to me are there's so many steps in it and so much verbiage that sometimes it's not helpful in giving good feedback. So this is my place where I'm going to give 5 words that work for me. If they work for you, it's up to you. You said things that will fit under all 5 words. It just works so well for you to have those in mind and for your teachers to know. They are these. Plan. First one is plan. Did this teacher plan? Did this teacher think about this lesson before he or she walked in the classroom? Is it connected to the standards of that course or that grade level? Is it grow from things that this group should be learning? Plan. is the first one. Thanks, Marie, for quickly doing that for me. The second one is teach. Does this teacher use excellent teaching strategies, excellent teaching skills? Are they using transitions? Does the teacher know how to ask questions and get responses? Just little things that teacher can use. Plan, teach. I'll flesh some of those out in just a little more. Plan, teach. The third one, and I didn't hear anyone say this one when I was asking you what do you look for, but when I said, you all say, oh yeah, we do that too, is check. Plan, teach, check. Is the teacher checking for understanding? Well, you kind of did because you said, does the teacher know where each student is relative to that lesson? Plan, teach, check. Teachers are always really good teachers, checking to make sure all students understand the concept. If they've got it, let's move on. Or let's enrich that. Let's deepen the understanding. If they're not there yet, what am I going to do to reteach? Really good teachers say, this isn't working very well, and they regroup, right? They do it again. They try it a different way. Plan, teach, check. The fourth one you also mentioned, environment. Environment. Is this a classroom environment? I mean, give 2 parts to environment. Is this classroom environment conducive to learning? Do kids feel like they're part of a family? Are they feeling comfortable in here? It's an educational family. Are they willing to risk? Are they willing to ask questions? Are they willing to talk? Is everyone being engaged in that classroom? We have a culture of great learning in that classroom. It's the environment. The second part of environment is just the classroom look good. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. Some people are really good at making the most astonishing bulletin boards. That was never my great skill. I don't know, maybe because I taught in the secondary level. It always seems to me it's more of an elementary school teacher's skill than secondary, but that's not always true. So that would, yeah, I don't want to draw that hard line, but thank goodness I had someone who helped me sometimes with bulletin boards. Mine would have been terrible. But not just that, but are things neat and orderly? Do kids know where things go? Do they know, does the room not just heaped with a mess and the environment is just such that they can't function? Had a teacher's classroom, I took pictures of it, and I said once to this principal, didn't this give you any clue? Wasn't this a red flag that something may be wrong in that classroom? That because it was, teacher didn't know what anything was. It was just heaped with mess. And she was having she had a lot of difficulty, a lot of tough problems. She couldn't continue that school year. She had to go for partly because she was in that parking lot shooting up heroin between breaks, but for other reasons, it could have been a clue. That would be a
The messy classroom is all of it.
But it gave I mean, you say, it doesn't, isn't this a red flag when you see something? Maybe you need to look a little closer, deeper to that. Isn't this a red flag? Yeah, it is, I think. And it doesn't mean everyone's room looks the same. You can function in a what may be messy to someone, but everybody knows how it works and it works for them and it's great. So it just, sometimes it's a red flag. So that's that second part of the environment. And the last one is, and I didn't hear anyone mention, but you're also going to say, yeah, that's important to us too, is professionalism. Is this person a professional? Does this person play well in the sandbox with others? Does this teacher complete paperwork we need done? They're taking role. Are they following our school procedures? Are they following the things that we do? Are they professional? They'll work, they will collaborate as well with other members of their team, or are they just always so negative, it's very difficult for them to work together? Yeah.
Do you think about those 5 things like on an equal plane, or do you, if you were like, okay, I can let this be, you know, like think about this category and allow for some low in that category, but this has to be high. This always has to be high.
Yeah, I think that you can. I think that you can, and you will sometimes. what I'm going to say to you with that, that I would have talked about is a good segue to do it, is to say, sometimes you're only going to evaluate or give feedback in one area. This is the thing we're going to concentrate on as a team in our school today, or this week, or this quarter, or this year. We're going to really focus on this one thing. And so then you just really focus on that. But the reason you need 5 is because you also can't neglect the others. You can't leave something out. You can't say, this is a wonderful person for planning, but just can never execute that in a classroom. Or we really like this, it has a beautiful classroom, but is the most negative person to get along with. Just everybody, makes everybody and the rest of the team, the rest of the teachers uncomfortable and always so negative, and only says, this is my room, just leave me alone, I do my own. We need to collaborate. So you can't neglect any of them. You want all 5, you need to think of all 5. And maybe there's more than that. I can't think of any. I've only, if any of you can think of beyond the 5, I'd love to hear it. You ruined my 5-finger thing, but I'd love to hear it anyway. I still want to know. So is there something else? Maybe, but as I've worked at it, it's all encapsulated in those 5 items. Plan, teach, check. Environment, professionalism. Those 5. So yes, you may focus or concentrate on one. You say, we really need to, as a school, really work on the area of teaching. We're going to improve our teaching skills. We're going to become really the best teachers, but don't neglect planning and checking in the meantime, because they're so tightly connected to, I can't neglect them. But that's really going to be something I concentrate on. Like, I love in the teaching one, and this, some of you I know use this already, but if you use teach like a champion, do some of you use teach like a champion? I love it. I like this because it gives you and teachers a common vocabulary. Teachers know what you're looking for. They can say them. If you go to your school right now and say to teachers, what is it that you're being evaluated on? They'll struggle. I almost guarantee. Well, kind of this, I guess, and maybe some of that. If they know those 5, they've got 5 that are clear in their heads. They know exactly what you're talking about. You have a common vocabulary. What does this mean? As I'm looking at your checking, this is what I noticed. And you'll talk about that specifically. In teaching, this among a lot of other kinds of texts, but I'll just use this one as an example. If you don't know Teach Like a Champion yet, it's a wonderful text, but it is Doug Lamov who looked at a lot of teachers, thousands of teachers, and looked at what really good teachers were doing and start to see a lot of commonalities among them, and then start to label them. We had never labeled is that teaching technique. He labeled them. And then you can start to learn those individual skills if you know what they are and have them labeled. Some of you who have used it, talk about how it's helpful to you. Yeah.
It's been quite a few years, but like you said, it's a common language, like love and logic, or it's a school-wide program that is very clear, and it's easy to teach, it's easy to understand, and it really builds that cohesiveness among the teachers.
Yeah, well said, thank you.
The other thing I love about it is once you've set a foundation with it, they're quick snippet tools. Like this morning, I just was even writing down the list. I'm like, oh, my teachers need a reminder on these 3 things. So my next week that you update, I'm just going to tell them to read it. And it's a page and a half. So it's a quick, like, go through, remind yourself, let's step this up a little bit. So it's a quick way to give blanket feedback.
Yeah, well said, well said. This is one I'm seeing that we need to work on. So that even more specifically than the 5, but even within one of those 5s, you can be very specific. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I was just saying, correct. We've done that. And I've said things like, oh, you know what? We're not, oh my gosh, what was the most recent one? It was just, we're letting students opt out. Basically. We're not following up with that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because it's clear.
Yeah. Opt out means you allow a student, it just names it, that a student can say, I don't know. You don't let them opt out. kids have to respond, and they respond to sentences. That Lamont talks about and gives a really good case for that happening. And cold call is one that you're just calling on kids and you can do it quickly. Here's another one. I'll show you one of his techniques. I don't mean to just focus on his alone and say that's the only one, because there are a lot of ways to learn teaching techniques. But if you're looking for something, this is a really good one to try. So will 3 of you do this one with me? All right. So I'm going to ask, what year did Columbus sail with the Pinta, the Nina, and the Santa Maria? Don't say 1492. You can pick any year you want. Well, you pick any year you want to, but you need to say 1492. All right. So we've been teaching in our social studies class. We've been talking about that year that Columbus received money from Ferdinand and Isabella and had 3 ships and he sailed to the New World. What year was that?
1512.
1457.
What year was that?
1460. Sorry, like 59 stuff. 1462. Columbus shelled the ocean blue.
1492, he sailed the ocean blue. What year was that?
1492.
What year was that?
1492.
1492. See, by that little technique, I never let a student have a wrong answer. I don't say, Ron, we've been studying this whole time. Why don't you pay attention? Really? That's what you say? I don't say anything. I just move on. When I have an answer, I go back and let everyone who had the wrong answer now have the right answer. They all can speak out the right answer. It's just a quick technique that creates a better environment in the classroom and everyone has an opportunity to respond correctly and learn that answer. It's just a little technique. So you learn those kinds of things. I did, for some of my team, I made this little book of Teach Like a Champion. So every page has one of the techniques on it that we use, and it's an idea. Probably the new versions, I don't know if the new versions, because mine is an older one, but somehow it must still come with, this has a CD in the back that you can put in and you see examples of teachers doing what he talked about. There must be I don't know if it's still a disc or if it's a link to a website. Is it a link now? Okay, there you go. That's
say because none of the computers have.
Yeah, we don't have that.
We can't use CDs now.
Special to play something like that anymore. So yeah, we don't even do it in our homes. I see all those shelves of DVDs that I spent a lot of money on, but we only stream things these days anyway, right? What an evolution over time. I remember going to a record store when I lived in Hawaii, and we lived way out in the boonies, but there were records. I mean, 33 1/3 RPMs. Some of you don't remember those big LPs, maybe, but we went to a store, there weren't any of them in there. So I'd buy a record. There were no records left. There weren't any in there. Now we're starting to have some again. So I have to always these changes of technology. It's so fun to go through. All right. So if you're working on teaching, this is one way you could do that. We're going to work on these 3 techniques during the week. So you can even focus more on the teaching with just by picking out techniques. You could say, we're just going to work on planning. We're going to work on planning. We're going to make sure that this connects to standards. I should know that you have a lesson plan that come in, that you're not just winging it. I know that there's a plan in place and it's connected to something. I know where you're going. I know you have an objective. And more than that, when you said focus on students, students know what the objective is. Do students understand the objective that you're working toward? Not that you just wrote it on the board, but they understand. So you can do the planning, teaching, we talked about the checking, and there's so many ways to check. I mean, 100 ways. I have at home my grandmother's old slate board. She has it was about that big, and she used, when she was in school, it was old, this slate where she just wrote on with chalk. Well, we still have slate boards we use. They only are called whiteboards, right? And kids can write on them in their desk, hold them up. Or they have iPads and they hold the iPads up, and a teacher can scan all those iPads and that fast know how many had the right answers or not. And so it's just amazing the kinds of things. We've always used the best technology we had at the time. So you can use that. And we might have a technique for checking that we want to use. Environment as well as professionalism. Each of those you can break down. Now, as you do that, I want to make sure we have time. We have just a few minutes left, but enough. So let's talk about then with that. I want to make sure if you went in with teachers and worked on that, then that's kind of the things that you can do to make teachers better, not bitter, because they understand what you're looking for. You know what you're looking for, and you talk about it consistently. Then you need to be in the classrooms all the time. Then always what's fed will grow. If you're feeding good things, this worked well. When you're meeting as a faculty, I saw this in this person's classroom and this in this person's classroom, and they were remarkable. If you want to know how to do that, you could talk to this individual. I loved, or ask them to demonstrate in a faculty meeting, but you don't know how to have them do that unless you're in classrooms, because you don't know what anyone is doing unless you're there. And I know we have a lot of fires that come up along the way. They're going to pull us off task, but you just sometimes have to just commit to that day. It's like you make a doctor's appointment. Sometimes you have a hard time getting in. You're going to make that appointment no matter what. Sometimes you may need to make appointments. I'm going to be in classrooms today, and don't break your appointment. Even when fires come up, have others help you. She would like to talk with you right now, but she can't because of these things. Obviously, if there's a big fight and people are bloody, you're going to do something about it, right? But you have to, as much as you can, get others to help you with that, because your main job has to be in classrooms. If that is the key to great education, if that is the key to our success, a great teacher in every classroom, you are the one, you are the key then that makes that happen. So you're going to have to be there to make that happen. I always call it this way too. I don't know about the rest of you. You probably all are very law-abiding citizens. And so you don't need to tell me if you are or not, but I will admit I'm not always, in the sense of when I drive on a freeway, I go way too fast. And it's kind of a puzzle to me. I think if I can get around those two cars, I can get up here and I can get into that one and I can be ahead of everybody. And that person's making nuts. So my wife hates to drive it and she won't. But I just start doing that, right? And not fast enough, unless there's a highway patrolman on the freeway. And that person doesn't have to say anything, but I just slow way down and I'll wait. All right. Hope you're getting off the next section, right? I want that person to go. So here I am moving along, right? I'm staying in control. Let me tell you, some of that is true in our schools. If you are just cruising the highway of your school, you sometimes don't have to do a lot when you go into a classroom, because teachers will self-correct on their own. They will self-correct, but you have to be there to do it. So you have to be there. Then if they're self-correcting, you're just around, then you're watching all the time, being in charge. That becomes the habit. That just is what we do in our school. This is how we do it. And you're talking that language, you're feeding that. Then when you go into a classroom, make sure you always follow up, because teachers will say, well, you're in my classroom. What did you think? What did you see? What did you want? Was it okay? It takes, if you have a laptop, seconds to send an email. I really appreciated watching you, how you did this. Hey, when you have a minute, come and talk to me. I have some ideas for you that I think that you will like, that will help you, that will be useful to you in your work. So you give them that feedback, but that's always there. And you have that common language, you all can come to that same place all the time. If that is what's most important, if that's the key to great education, then you just have to be there and do it, right? That's the most important. I can tell you there isn't anything that you do that's more important. I want to make sure I didn't leave out anything. This is not something, if we had lots of time, but I think you need to be able to go on. Let me tell you a site though. On the Massachusetts Department of Education site, you can look for exemplary teacher videos. They have a whole bunch of them of teachers teaching in a classroom. Sometimes I just bring bring one up and we could look at what we thought that teacher was doing and learn what was that teacher doing well and not so good. And you could, with teachers, if you preview them, you may find some. If there's a specific skill you're working on, you see a teacher who does it well or not so well, you can bring up that video and show them. It's a great library of videos of teachers in classrooms, and you can just pick clips out of that and show your teachers and then talk about it. The nice thing about it is I'm not having a videotape of somebody in my school. This is somebody we don't know and we can talk about it and then it's more comfortable. So that's a great resource. I hope you'll use.
What did you say?
It's a Massachusetts Department of Education. So if you go to, I think it's Deep Mass. I'll tell you what the site is.
DOE.mass.edu.
That's it.
Resources.
That's it. You can Google it. It's DOE, Department of Education, DOE, Mass for Massachusetts .edu. But you can just their teacher examples, videos of teacher examples, and you Google that, it'll come up. You'll find it. But it's a great resource, and it's one that you can then show pieces and have to share and have that feedback. All right, I'll say one last thing about subs, just because I said I would, as you talk about substitute teachers. Two things, real quick. One, we do need to care about substitutes as we're also caring about teachers in our school. Because the research tells us that 1 full year of a child's K-12 education is taught by a substitute teacher. 1 full year. That means 180 days, and in some schools more than that, of a child's K-12 education is taught by a substitute teacher. When you aggregate it like that, that's astonishing, right? And the second thing to think about is the research also says not only money, but one of the things that most attracted subs to come to your school. So if you have parents, potential folks in your school community who might, the thing that attracted them the most is that you provide them some training first. They're afraid just to walk into a classroom and not know what they were doing. If they're former teachers, that's easy, but you're going to have a lot of folks who have no education or teaching background, but if you give them some training first, they were much more likely to volunteer and be willing to substitute if you had just a little training. We're looking for some great subs, and we would like to train you in how to do that and teach you how. And we'll give you some great techniques that will help you to be able to do it. I'd be glad to help you do that if you need to too. So, all right. What last things you want to say? Are you hoping I'll shut up so you can go? I would be if I were sitting there. So anything else? All right. Anytime. I'm only an email away. If you have questions, you want to talk about any of those techniques or talk about those things, I would love to be with you and to work with you in your schools. I like to be in schools. So just know it's purely selfish on my part. I admit it. So to be with teachers in schools, I'd love it. So don't hesitate to ask. Thank you all. Thanks for letting me be here. Thanks.
Right. Well, have a good afternoon and evening, and we'll see you next month.
They don't know your name.